Hi, we're here today with Jessica Oudbier of Allendale, Michigan. Today's date is February 19th, 2015. The interviewer is Adam Jones of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. And let's begin. Okay, Jessica, could you begin with a little bit about yourself, namely where and when were you born?
I was born April 6th, 1989, to Guy Sanders Thayer and Janice Marie Connor in Fort Ord, which is a base that no longer exists. It's an Army base in Monterey Bay, California. It was while my father was stationed there for the D-Lab Institute when in Russia.
Okay, so what was it like growing up on a military base?
We moved around a lot, and so we started out in California. Eventually we moved to places like Colorado was the next stop, and then they moved to Spokane, both my mother and my father. They were about to move back to Colorado Springs, in which my father was stationed at NORAD, and during that time their marriage fell apart, so they got divorced. My mom moved us back to Spokane, Washington. We stayed there with her. My father stayed in the Air Force for quite some time, and he moved around a bit between there and Colorado and Ohio and around. So I spent most of my time in my formative years from age 0 to 6 on base, going to base schools, base daycare, and the rest of it. And then I spent a lot of time around base communities within Spokane, Washington, as well as visiting my father during the summers and holidays on base in Colorado Springs. And the main difference is that when you move around a lot, you don't get to have a lot of friends. So if you move like once every 2 years, it's kind of difficult to have long-lasting friendships, and you kind of get into the habit of knowing that no matter what friends that you make, you're going to be moving within a year, and you get used to that lifestyle to the point where right now, moving back here to a place like this where everybody has family and friends that they've known for generations, you know, they have all their family right next to each other, they're all very close-knit. It's very odd to move into that and knowing that you're going to stay somewhere. You don't get that fresh start.
Right. Now you mentioned that your father, that's a defense language.
Correct,
right?
D-Lab.
And he was also at NORAD. What did your father do for the military?
My father was in the Air Force, and what I can gather, he was originally a Russian linguist. However, due to things happening in the home, it was hard for him to learn the language, and so he eventually learned how to fly satellites. And by flying satellites is every time a satellite would pass overhead, he would take in the data. And so he worked very similar circumstances that I did, which is in a cold, dark room with lots of bleeping computers, getting very close and getting personal with the people around you for random shifts, not sleeping much. And he stayed there for quite some time and was very, very good at his job.
Okay. Did you have any siblings growing up?
I did. I have one brother. And then my father has gone on to have 2 children with his current wife, so now I have 2 children smaller than mine. So they're my brother and my sister, Nora and Ian.
Okay. And where did you go to high school?
I went to high school first at John R. Rogers High School in Spokane, Washington for the first half. I decided it was time for me to fly the coop, so I left my mother's house and moved in with my father in Beaver Creek, Ohio at the age of 16.
Okay.
Or 15. It was on Valentine's Day when I first started school at Beaver Creek High School in outside of Dayton, Ohio, Beaver Creek, Ohio, which is right next to Wright Pat Air Force Base.
Okay. And then how old when did you graduate from high school?
I graduated 2007.
2007. Okay. So, you grew up in a very military environment. Now you also said you lived with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
How did that compare in terms of living in a military community and living in a civilian community?
It was kind of odd, but a lot of the kids in the civilian community that I lived in had parents in the military. We all lived right next to base, and so it was not an uncommon thing to have mommy or daddy in the military.
Okay.
So we were still very close to it, and it wasn't like we ever left it. It was a common thing. Now you have to remember that the population of the military is like less than 1% of the United States, and so you're part of a very inclusive area. Like we have jokes of running into other families. Like my dad has a joke that he keeps running into Mike Gillings. Mike Gillings has popped in and out of our lives forever, and other random family members that you know within your own military community. So you guys are tight-knit in which you know everybody's dirty secrets, but at the same time, you're more removed from one another.
Okay.
You're not staying close to each other. It's just that, oh, you were in Japan? That's cool. I was in Japan. Do you know Bob? Actually, yes, I do know Bob. That guy threw up on my uniform. So you have these
Right.
random associations with other families, other people, so-and-so's kid, but
Yeah.
it's across the world as opposed to Bob down the street. It's Bob in Japan.
Okay.
So it's kind of an odd thing. But living with my mother was kind of odd. She lives with me now. She's a very depressed individual. She's got agoraphobia. It's hard for her to leave the house. She's very anxious. And so growing up, my brother was sickly, and it was my job to take care of my mother and my brother. Or I perceived it as such. I probably, didn't have to, but I felt that it was my job. So
Right.
it was very odd moving between one house where I was in charge of things, where I could pretty much, do whatever I wanted to, and then it was my job to take care of things and worry about things, and then go to a, quote, normal household where I was a kid. So my rank changed depending on where I was in the house.
Right.
If I was with my father, I was 13-year-old punk-ass kid. If I was at my mother's house, it was to make sure mom pays the bills, make sure my brother keeps breathing. If anybody picks a fight with him at school, I'll beat the shit out of him, those types of things. So
Exactly. Okay, well, at some point, you decide to enlist. Now, what prompted you to enlist?
it was kind of a known thing that I would. Like, it's a common thought that you go to high school and then you join the military and then you stay in forever, or you go to college and then you go in as an officer.
Okay.
You eventually do government service. It doesn't necessarily have to be the military, but somebody eventually goes into government service. That is part of what you do. At least that's what I picked up on. And so when it came time, I distinctly in middle school remember 9/11 happening and remembering, this is a funny story, but I'm 13 years old, I'm in Spokane, Washington, and, and I remember being in class at Jefferson Middle School on the South Hill in Spokane, Washington. I was there. These were all the rich kids. We were very poor, so it was kind of an odd dynamic there. But I remember trying to explain to the teacher as I saw that planes were attacking. I knew a couple of things. I knew that my mom's brother, Uncle Carl, worked in the Pentagon. I knew that's where he was.
Okay.
So Uncle Carl has now had a plane crash into him. He might be dead. I knew for a fact that my father was eventually going to be going to war. That this right here, as we're watching it on television, everyone else is going, oh my God, this is horrible. This is so sad for those people. I'm thinking, I need to call my dad before he goes to war, because he's going away now. Anything that happened during the Cold War, especially, my father would tell my mother, hey, you need to move back on base immediately. My mom's like, but I like my apartment on the beach. He's like, I don't give a shit, you're moving back on base. So it's a very common thing that our family, we know who's deploying. My uncle's going, my other uncle's going. Things in my family are changing right now due to what's happening. And I'm staring at a grown-ass man, my teacher, for homeroom, and I'm looking at him at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm saying, look, I have to go call my father. I need to call him before he goes to war. And he says, we're not going to war. I'm like, no, this is war. I'm 13 years old, I don't really know. But what I do know is, shit's blowing up, we're being attacked, I need to find my father. And say, I love you, good luck, be safe, I know I'm not going to see you for a long time. It was a feeling. And I'm talking to this man, and I say, I need to find my brother, I need to find my mother, and I need to call my father before he goes to war. And he wouldn't understand me, and he's just like, well, that's not what it means, you're scaring the other children. I don't give a fuck about these other kids, okay? I am 13, and my world is small, and daddy's going to war, so look, motherfucker, you better let me go. I need to call my dad right now. And so finally I got belligerent enough that I got sent to the principal's office, and I was able to go home. And, I called my dad, and he said everything was going to be okay, that. But the feeling amongst the family was, we couldn't find my uncle for a while, after the Pentagon was hit. And my mom kept trying to call him, and then he says, here's the deal. I'm part of the anti-terrorism, counter-terrorism attack thing, before we even started using those phrases as common things. This was a common knowledge amongst my family. This is my job. I'm kind of busy right now. I am safe, I will call you. And so that's what he did. I'm going to not state his name clearly,
That's fine.
for his protection. He currently works for the DEA, and he also works for the government.
Okay.
So,
No, that's fine.
and yeah, so it's a funny thing that when that happened, my world completely changed in the sense of, Not necessarily the same way as like, oh, we've been attacked. I knew it was going to happen eventually. My family talked about it all the time, that our country has a habit of poking other countries. And then bad things happen, and we're like, well, no fucking duh. You know, so it's an ingrained form of patriotism that is different, in which we say, yeah, we do really dumb things. And then we try to make up for those dumb things, and then more dumb things happen. And it's part of what happens when you're doing counter-terrorism back and forth. And yes, our country sometimes is the group of terrorists. We do make mistakes, and it is our job to make sure that we do our jobs the best that we can and not make those mistakes. And so it's a different mindset about being a patriot, and that comes into faults later. But go ahead, ask your question.
Oh, that's fine. So 9/11 was kind of a moment for you where it really did solidify the fact that you were going to eventually have to serve.
Not have to. I wanted to. Like, it was, our country does dumb things. Check. And I have this belief that it is a young person's responsibility. If you get out of high school, and you're coming to your senior year, and everyone's looking at colleges, and my father's proud of me for this moment, for recognizing this in myself. He said it's the most mature thing a most immature kid could ever say. And I'm 17 years old, and I'm looking at all the colleges, and really all I wanted to do at 17 years old as a young woman was get drunk and get laid. And I knew that about myself, and I narrowed it down, and I distilled it down, and I knew that I wasn't motivated or dedicated enough to go to college, that if I went there, I would just be sampling all the drugs. I would be sleeping with all the interesting people, all the men, all the women. I just wanted to go out and experience the world. But I also had this belief that, you know, if you're going to use and spend your youth on something, use it for government service. That if you love your country, then you give it time. And they're going to ask you to do dumb, stupid shit. You're going to polish that bell, and it's going to suck. And you're going to do it for 18 hours a day, and it's going to suck. But donate your time to your country. So that even if shit hits the fan, you know that at least there's one good person there who says, man, this is going to suck, and is going to be able to carry it through, and not, you know, condone rape, and not condone negative behaviors, and be the shining example you want to see in the world. All that bullshit. It's kind of lofty, and it's, yeah. I had hopes and dreams and shit, but at 17 I knew that college was not for me.
Okay.
And I joined instead. And I told my father I'm joining the Navy, and they had to send a permission slip because I was 17. And they sent it to my mother, and the letter came to my mom, and they showed up with a letter and said, your daughter wants to join. And she said, okay. And then she went down to the service center and signed right away. And she said, that's what you want to do. All right, whatever. Because she knew that I would have spoken to my father and other people about which branch to join, you know, where I would be a better fit, whether I should go or not. I had to, before joining, I had to go to my shrinks, because I had many. I have severe depression. Okay. And I'd been a depressed kid for most of my life. But I had severe depression, and I had to make sure that none of that would pop up if they were looking at me for security clearance.
Okay.
So I had to go and talk to my shrink, and my stepmom set that up, and then she made it so that I would be able to receive medication and receive therapy for, you know, my brain, and not have that show up in medical records.
Okay.
So we tanked all of it. We destroyed all those records, because we knew that, you know, just because I had depression doesn't mean that I was going to be a bad soldier. It just meant that they couldn't know about it until I joined, and then I had to have it be revealed as a big surprise.
Okay.
So yeah.
Revelation.
Yes.
Okay, so you joined the Navy. When did you enlist?
My official start date was August 15, 2007.
Okay. And then, so eventually you're going to report for basic training. Do you remember when and where you reported for basic?
Yes, I went up to MEPS, which is the processing center for when you military enlisted processing. Blah, 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 blah. So I went to MEPS in Cleveland, Ohio, I think. They sent me up to Cleveland. We got to stay in a hotel with a bunch of other people. Then we got to go to the MEPS office, where they poke and prod you and ask you a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
Take terrible pictures of you. Go through your record, ask you 6 or 7 times if you've ever done drugs, and the correct answer is no. Whether you did or not, the correct answer is no. And, yeah, even if you tried weed once, they're gonna hammer down on you. They're just gonna be like, why did you do it? Because the Linkin Park CD came out and someone handed it to me and said it was a good idea. You don't say that. The answer is no. So after they're done poking and prodding you, then you go back and then you wait. And then the bus comes. You show up to the airport to go to Chicago. My father got me a bright pink duffel bag, which earned me the nickname Barbie for part of boot camp. That was fun. And then they fly you off to Chicago, and you show up there, and you land, and then the yelling starts. And then they yell at you for the next couple of months.
Yeah, what was your first impression of basic training? Like how?
I got a pretty fair rundown from my father and my uncles and other members of my family. Pretty much they said, it's gonna suck, it's gonna end. That's it. You're gonna show up, they're gonna yell at you, no matter what you do, you're wrong. And that's okay. What I thought was interesting was watching other people who were not from military families being surprised by this and trying to fight with the RDCs, which is the recruit division. They're they're not the recruiters, but the
similar to a drill sergeant.
Similar to a drill sergeant, yeah.
Okay.
And so you show up, and they're arguing with these people, and I'm like, you don't argue, you keep your mouth shut.
Now, was that actually kind of prevalent where people were trying to challenge
Authority?
challenge
Yeah.
the authority? Really?
Yeah, and it was kind of funny to watch especially the other men and women, you know, who were trying to fight small things like haircuts. You know, like yeah, just small things. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, how do you not know this? Have you ever seen a war movie? Do you not know? It's pretty accurate. You show up, they take away your underwear, they take away your clothes. You tell them, set them in a box, you'll never see it again. And you go, okay, cool. And you get naked in front of lots of people, and for a lot of people this is new. I grew up in a very free household where nakedness is not a problem. I thought I was slick. I got my haircut done before I went in a nice A-line bob so that it would look nice, but it was still within regs, because I knew what the regs were, you know. They said, that's too cute, so they cut it up to here. Yeah, and I said, but it's in regs, you cut it short, because I had my hair down to my waist before, you know, and I got it cut short. I thought it was a nice professional haircut. I was going to go in there with a step forward, and they made it uneven and cut it all the way up to here. And I was like, well, there goes my slickness, and I was a little disgruntled about it. And that was funny.
All right, so, and then where, did you know, let's see, did you know why the other people had enlisted?
A lot of them said it was for college. College is stupid expensive. It's the year 2015, college is stupid expensive. And they couldn't afford it, so they joined. Other people had this idea that, you know, they were joining because they had nowhere else to go. A lot of them were poor kids like me. The people who joined the military are children of other military families, especially for enlisted, or other kids from military families where it's an obvious go-to here. People who had gotten in trouble in their youth and were told either jail or, you know, that. And that doesn't happen as much, you know, as often anymore. But frequently, you get the troubled kids, you get the poor kids, and you get the military grads. And those who are what you get in the Marine, you know, in the Marine Corps and the Navy. That's what you get. And so they're all of a similar socioeconomic background to me. And every once in a while you get one or two rich kids. They're the funny ones to watch. They're the ones who are like, you mean that I have to eat this and I have to do it quickly? And those of us who were poor kids are like, well, yeah. Duh. Can I have some more, please? No, you cannot have some more.
Okay.
I was deemed underweight the second I got there, so they tried to get me to eat more food.
Okay.
And I couldn't do it, so I ended up vomiting on people, which is pretty funny.
All right. So what did the training really consist of?
The first part of basic training this is for all branches, and this is like through back the history of time, Spartan times, is to break you down and build you up into a unit. So usually what they do is they pick an individual, make them the enemy. That was me. They pick the mouthiest or the smartest, and they really make them feel like shit, or they pick somebody else to do it. And they try to get you guys to band together as a group to work together against the RDCs, but also cause some division amongst each other to work out, and then do that. And the basic way to do that is to make your life really hard, yell at you, and call you names. So the first part of basic training is doing really, really, really stupid shit to break down your expectations of privacy, break down your expectations of individuality, break down competition. They're trying to make sure that you are on the straight and narrow in the sense of someone says jump, you ask how high. And even then you don't ask how high, you keep jumping until they tell you to stop. So I knew that going in. It didn't make it suck any less, but I did it. And I did the best that I could. And it's mainly marching, running, exercises. We would have training in a computer room where they would send you to learn things like military history. They gave you the Blue Jackets manual, which is still the same thing as it's always been, where you sit and you learn about the different types of ships. Now, it was very difficult for me to learn any of those things. I did not do so well on those tests.
Okay.
But before you go, they make you do the ASVAB if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, what, and just for a point of clarification, what is the ASVAB?
The ASVAB is... It's the test that you take that gives them some sort of sense of aptitude of what you're good at and what you're not good at. I was surprisingly got a 96. My husband got a 98. So he and I were both considered very bright by military standards. Just slightly different than civilian standards, but not by much.
Okay.
And that test includes... I hope you don't mind if I start chain smoking, but it's the... They ask you mechanical questions, spatial relations questions, mathematics, engineering questions, and the rest of it. And I scored very high. And so you pick your job before you go to boot camp.
Okay.
Yeah. They sit you down, I forgot to mention that, while you're at MEPS, they sit you down and they say, hey, you scored really high, what do you want to be? And I said, they were really pushing for me to go nuke. And to be a nuclear technician means you work on the nuclear ships. That means that you work on the nuclear reactor that is on board, the big decks, the really big ships, the aircraft carriers. You also work on submarines. Now, being a female, I wanted to work on a submarine. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work on a submarine so bad it hurt. And I was told that women could be on submarines by my recruiter. That was the one question I asked. And I looked it up on the internet and they said no, so I knew he was full of crap. And I was just like, well, maybe they could sneak me in somewhere. You know, maybe I can get a sex change or, you know. No, I can't be on a submarine.
What's the reason for that?
I don't know. I'm little. I like the movie Hunt for Red October. I don't know. It was I just thought the idea of... I had very romantic notions of what it meant to be a sailor.
Okay.
You know, and very romantic notions of what it meant to be in the military. Like, I thought that it would be the same as my male family members. I was the only female to join.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had an idea that it would be like them, where I would be buddy-buddy with my brothers in arms, and we would all be one team, and it would be a close-knit family community. I learned the hard way that it wasn't, so...
Right, I mean, it's going to be a question I ask later, too, about being a woman in the military. But just in basic, did you already get a sense of that it'd be more difficult for you to be a woman in the military?
Yes. When I first got in, the first couple of weeks, there was a couple of women who didn't like me very much, and they were black. And I had not experienced black people very often. I only encountered their culture through movies and music, and I didn't like the music, and in the movies they were scary. So... This is me accepting my own racism, my own ignorance. And I know that that is ignorant and stupid, but this is my first encounter with lots and lots of black women in particular.
Okay.
And they did not like me at all. I was that white bitch. That was the first time I was referred to as that white bitch, and that was not the last time, and it would get me in trouble many times throughout the rest of my career. And I don't know what I did wrong. I think I tried too hard, you know, because I didn't know what to do.
Right.
When they asked me specific questions, I would answer like I would answer any normal person, but apparently because of the way that I speak. My mother's an English major. I use big words. It makes it sound like I'm trying to be smarter than other people. Maybe I do have an inferiority complex or something that makes me want to try to seem smarter than I am. That is a very true thing. That might be true, and I've admitted that to people openly many, many times. But, you know, something happened, I pissed them off, and one of them snuck in a dirty, used feminine product into my rack, which is the size of a smaller than a twin-size mattress.
Okay.
So it's a little tiny thing, it's about yay deep, made of metal, compartmentalized, you have to keep it perfectly organized at all times, so help you God, you know. I sucked at folding underwear, but I was terrible at that. But, they snuck one in there, and I was harangued in front of everybody by a male RDC. They separated us, the men and the women, in 2 different compartments. And I was dragged up short and called out in front of everybody, saying, "What the hell is this? This is disgusting. How could you do?" And I'm looking at it like, guys, I'm on the shot. I haven't had a period in 2 years. Now, I haven't tried to discuss this logically with somebody when they're trying to harangue you. I've realized is not you just take the hits. This is where I first learned that. Just take the hits and be like, yep, I am a disgusting, filthy, you know, horrible person. That's right. I am awful. I did that, definitely, totally. And I explained to them, but I was fighting the system. Fighting hard. And I said, no, go back to my medical record. I'm on the shot. I haven't had a period in a long-ass time. The shot is Depo-Provera, by the way. It doesn't happen anymore. I don't have that. This is a medical impossibility. I don't have feminine issues anymore. And they were just like, how would this get here? I'm like, why would I wear a pad in the first place? I prefer tampons. So I had to go in and explain my feminine preferences to a female RDC, because the male one obviously doesn't know these types of things. I wouldn't expect him to. Looking back on it, he's a 24-year-old male. How much experience has he had with the feminine's ways of bleeding? He doesn't. So, but the damage was already done, Okay. That nasty ass sailor. And anyway, so I brought it up with the two black female individuals from Compton who went in together. And I said, hey, look, I know you did this. You're the only people who don't like me. I don't understand why you would do that. And they were using very disparaging remarks, including the word nigger over and over, which made me very uncomfortable because I don't know what to do with that, because this is my first encounter with black people where I know that's a bad word, and it got in my face. They tried to kick my ass. People separated them. They were removed from basic training. I still feel bad about that, because in my mind somewhere, I must have said something wrong to set these people off. I don't know what I did to make them hate me so much, but they hated me, and that bothers me. To this day, I want to find these people, hunt them down. Why did you hate me so much? What did I do? It doesn't matter.
It may just be nothing at all. It may have just been.
I don't know. It still bothers me to this day. I don't know why I have that effect on black people in general. I don't know. Apparently I'm a beacon of racism. And I try so hard not to be. It's like, I support the AACP, I'm sorry. I really want you guys to succeed. I want racism to end. I want you guys to stop being pulled over for stupid shit. I want the world to be a better place for you. I don't know how to do it. Please stop calling me that white bitch. Please. Thank you.
Now, did you, were there any problems with any of the male recruits?
The males were wary about how to talk to women.
Okay.
They didn't like women being in the military, which was an odd thing that I encountered. I thought that was odd. They were just like, well, these girls over here. I'm like, we vote now, so we're women, number one. Number two, we're here just the same as you are. You guys whine a lot. Is the space clean? Yes, then shut up. So I ran into that for the first time and thought that was very odd, especially when I was put in charge of my half of the division as AROC, which is the second in command. There's the recruit chief petty officer, which is the recruit chief petty officer is the first person in charge of a division. And then you have the AROC, which is the assistant recruit chief petty officer, which the acronyms don't match the whatever, and don't even try. It doesn't make sense. But my job was to sing cadence very loudly. Okay. And I was second in command as a female, and they were very hard for them to take me seriously. For some reason. I don't know why. It's probably because I'm 4'8" and adorable, but being adorable sucks. But they, at one point they didn't want to listen to me. And so I made them get an eye level with me. Because they weren't lining up for chow. And I said, alright, line up. They wouldn't do it. I said, alright, fine, height line. Height line, shortest and front, tallest, and I'm usually in front, whatever. I said, alright, I want everyone to get eye level with me. And so I had them get eye level with me. So all the tall men who were giving me the issues were now doing a squat. And I said, alright, I'm going to get a chow. You guys decided not to line up, you stay here. And I left. I ate my lunch very slowly, and I came back, and the RDCs were in their face, like, you're right, AROC told you to get in there, rah, rah, rah. And they were, listening, and my RPOC was standing there just like, what the f-? Because he was male. They lined him up male and female. So we had a male and female RPOC and a male and female AROC, two divisions, because they had to split the male and the females.
Right.
So every division was half male, half female, but it was odd. So I came back, and they were sweating and crying because they had been sitting in the squat position for 15 minutes, and we were being yelled at if they fell out. And then I came back and said, okay, are we ready to go to chow now? Whoosh! Height line. So I never had any issues after that.
Now, how did you become an AROC?
I was, pretty much, we all got sick. When you first show up to boot camp, you get the boot camp virus, which is what happens when you put 50 people from, 50 different states different viruses, different bugs, and you stick them in the same space. They effectively quarantine you that way for a while. Everybody gets sick. Everybody's sicker than a dog. Everybody. And a lot of people lost their voice, so I kind of just fell into it. And I sing pretty well.
Okay.
So, it wasn't anything like, she's got leadership capability. It was, who hasn't lost their voice yet, you know? I would like to think that I was picked because I was special. I'm not special.
Alright.
Truth be told, I was a terrible sailor. Awful. I didn't like taking orders. I argued. If I saw something was stupid, didn't do something right. But I tried really hard. But looking back on it, for the first couple of years, I was a terrible sailor. I was just awful. Just awful. Looking back, I cringe on the inside of some of the things that I tried to get away with. Just be like, Alright.
So you're at Chicago, so I'm guessing Great Lakes Naval Station?
Correct.
Okay.
We called it Great Mistakes.
I've heard that before from other veterans. And how long was your basic training?
I think it's about a month and a half. Maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that. Because I showed up in August.
6 to 8 weeks.
Something like that. I don't know. It felt like longer. It always feels like longer. And when it's over, you're like, oh man, that was only a month and a half. Oh, well. All I know is I went in during the summer, I came out during the winter. So,
Okay.
September, yeah.
That'd be, okay, winter of 2007.
Yeah, and then you hop on a bus after you graduate, and the final part is called battle stations, where they do stuff. That part is actually classified, so I shall glance over it. It's an open secret, though. You can look it up online. So,
That's fine.
yeah, so you go on the battle stations. You come out of battle stations, you're exhausted, and they play Proud to be an American, and you cry, and then you hate yourself for it for the rest of your life, because they give you a hat that says Navy instead of recruit on it. And you get your hat, and it's for some reason, it's an emotional build-up, and you fall for it every time. There's not a dry eye in the place. You put the hat on, and instead of the recruit, you put the Navy hat on, and you're in tears, and it's awful. Because afterwards, you know that is stupid. It is just, it's funny though, because you're looking at your buddy like, this is so dumb. And you're crying, and then you hop on a bus after you do your graduation ceremony. You hop on a bus. I went across the street, because that's where my A school was. A school is the school you go to after your basic training, to be an operations specialist, which is the job I eventually chose.
Okay.
And, yeah.
And what is an operations specialist?
What is an operations specialist? What don't we do? It's kind of a cush job. It's better than being a bosun's mate right off the bat, or being undesignated, or the rest of it. And it was considered beneath my ASVAB score, meaning I could have been anything, but I chose to be an operations specialist, and they're kind of like, that's for the 40 level people. That's not for, I don't know, it sounded like my dad's job. And you work with communications. You work in this place called CIC, also known as combat, on the ship. It is a cold, dark room, usually colored with red or blue lights.
Okay.
It is where you do the navigation of the ship. We are right underneath the bridge, usually. Bridge is up top with all the windows. We have no windows.
Okay.
It's very cold to keep all the equipment. You watch radar screens. You talk to the other ships via radio. Captain calls down anything, you comply. You make sure for sea and anchor that you are able to get out of the harbor. Air traffic control, if you do not have an actual air traffic control center, is usually right next to it or inside of it. If it's helicopter control, like it was on the New Orleans, then you are the air traffic controller. Congratulations, operations specialist. You are now going to a school. You will now learn air traffic control. There you go. Sometimes, like me, you fall into random systems that need to be learned, and you end up being an expert in it. And that was the highlight of my career. Was they handed me TBMCS, which is Theater Battle Management Combat System, eventually, and you specialize in that equipment, and you feel special.
Okay.
You feel special. You feel important. Anyway, so go back to your question.
Oh no, it's fine. So what did the training consist of then? In that school?
It can be 6 months long. You show up for about 8 hours a day. I also went for the night school as well. But you march to your schoolhouse, which for me was right across the street from my berthing, or your barracks. And you show up there and you stare at PowerPoints for 8 hours a day. And that is Operations Specialist training. You show up there, and sometimes they have modules where you get to learn things like MO boards, which is the movement boards, which is how you determine using triangles and angles, which I'm now learning again about in trigonometry, which for some reason is not correlating from college math to Navy math. It's like, I can tell you using angles and the rest of it exactly how far away that ship is from me, and if it's closing or not, closing, coming in, opening, going away. I can, do those types of things. You learn semaphore, you learn Morse code, you learn radio etiquette, how to speak on a radio, pick up a radio. It's like, hey, you, this is me. Information, over, click,
Okay.
think, he, speak, those types of things. And you learn all about those types of things, the different types of ships, their capabilities, all your different satellites and what they're used for and other stuff. But as a basic OS, you literally just show up and you do 8 hours of PowerPoints every day. And then you take tests on those PowerPoints. It is miserable, it is mind-numbing, and it is perfect training for exactly what your watches are going to be like once you're in.
Okay. So you get done with that. How long did it wind up being? Was it 6 months or was it shorter for you?
I graduated early. I took night school. I needed to get out of there. So I worked as quick as I could. And you get some free time, you can earn your liberty and the rest of it. I had a buddy who was from Chicago. My dad drove up my vehicle, so I secretly had a vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, and eventually got to the point because you had OSs, which is Operations Specialists, we refer to ourselves as OSs, and the cooks in the same building. Now the cooks, their school is much shorter. So if you're an OS in a building full of cooks, that means that they're cycling through a lot quicker than you are, and you're there for a lot longer. So you end up being in charge of the building eventually. Okay. And so I don't know. I tried my hardest to get away with as much as I could. Eventually, I would just, this is a shameful secret, I had issues sleeping. I've always had issues sleeping, but trying to sleep on command was very, very difficult, going to day school and night school, trying to get the hell out of there as soon as possible. And I would, if I needed more sleep, especially when I was depressed, I would go to medical and I would say, I am sick. Which I was, but trying to explain, mental health issues to people, especially if they're giving you a secret clearance, is not necessarily the wisest thing, so you gotta come up with other stuff. Yeah. And then you go back to the schoolhouse, and I learned very quickly how to falsify a 24-hour chit. And then learning how not only to falsify it, but how to make it so that you can get special exceptions. Like, I was allowed to go smoke whenever I wanted to. I found a way to do that, where I got a smoking chit. I don't know how, but with my crafty words, I was able to be like, look, I gotta be able to smoke, because if I don't, then it causes stress on the body, and like, yeah, whatever. Shut up, Thayer. That's my maiden name. Oh. Shut up, Thayer. Get outside and go smoke your cigarette and shut up. So I did, whatever I wanted to. I found ways to just get the basic comforts, which is all I wanted in the first place. So they're not supposed to let you, but it's not what you know, it's who you know, and usually if you just straight up ask politely, people give you what you want.
All right.
So, yeah.
And when did you complete that school? Do you remember?
February
2008?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you complete your training. Do you go on to any other training after that?
It depends on where you're going. You pick orders. And when you pick orders, you get your first billet to go somewhere. And I wanted to go work at NORAD with my dad, but somebody else got it. So I ended up going to Tactical Air Control Squadron 12, which is Type C sea duty. And what that means, or Type 2 sea duty, Type 3, I don't remember. Anyway, what it means is that technically you're on sea duty, which is a very big deal. Because you have sea duty and you have shore duty. And as an OS, you will not get shore duty. You just don't. Which sucks. Which means you're constantly deployed. Okay. So, as an OS, I got a pretty cush deal. I got to go, I had a 5-year billet to go to Tactical Air Control Squadron 12. And while I was there, that means that you are getting sea time for when you're going there. It is technically part of sea duty. You have to spend 5 years at sea, and then you get 4 years at shore. Okay. Or 2, depending on what your rotations are. And I had a 5-year billet to stay there, so that would be my entire sea duty. And that was great. And then I got there. And that's in San Diego, California. Okay. So I was sent there. And while I was, there, they had me go through some special training, because this is an air control squadron. So mostly this is air traffic controllers. We are a special detachment. We are considered staff. Now, within the Navy ranks, there are different things. You have ship people, which is your normal ship people. And then you have staff. We don't work for the ship's captain. We work for a fleet commander. We work for somebody else. We're a smaller detachment. We're specialized. We get special privileges. And so they hate us. So we are staff. And I loved being staff. Holy crap, did I love being staff. It was awesome. When you're on a ship, you don't have to go to sea and anchor duty. You stay in your rack and you go to sleep. And it's awesome. And when they have fire drills and stuff on the ship, you don't do it. You just don't. You find a place to hide and you stay there. That is our orders. You stay out of the way. I was like, oh, thank God. So, oof. So there's that.
Okay, so you go to San Diego. Now, what exactly were you doing in San Diego specifically? I know you were the Tactical Air Squadron and you're doing air traffic control type stuff with them, but what exactly were you doing at this time?
Fuck all of nothing. I showed up, and I wasn't very well received. And I made some friends there, but I also made some enemies. And this is where I really learned the hard way that being a female is very difficult in the military. So you're put in a barracks with both men and female, men and women. And when you first show up to your first command station, you were given lots of freedom. Finally, after the past couple of months of having none, suddenly you have a ton. So you have a bunch of horny 18-year-olds locked in a barracks together. The men who end up sleeping with a lot of women within the barracks were considered studly. You know what I mean? They were just like, yeah, I got to sleep with all these women. Yeah, I had that. She's a Navy 7, but I got the Navy 10 over here. You know what I mean? Like, okay. That's when it starts. And I didn't know how to deal with that because I always thought that we would be like the brothers in arms type people. That's what I was expecting.
Right.
And so when I did meet a nice young gentleman fellow that I wanted to have sexual relations with, I did. And it was very pleasant until I realized that they would later tell everybody about it, and it would get unpleasant from there. So I mainly started dating the Marines because they were outside of my sphere, because we had Marines on base as well. Okay. So I started dating the Marines instead because their Camp Pendleton is like right up the road from San Diego. I was on Coronado, okay. Naval Air Base, San Diego, which is right across from the SEAL base where you see a lot of SEAL training in all the movies. They're right across the street from me. I could pick up a rock and hit them if I wanted to. And so when you're there, you know, you got Marines crawling all over the place, everybody's in great shape, and everyone's horny as hell, and it's funny. But it's a normal behavior, and I recognize it as normal behavior for a young woman, free and on her own, has a vehicle, out in the world, dating the peoples, you know, getting into situations, getting out of them, young behavior. Okay. But it really hurt my career right off the bat to do that. I was considered a whore within like 2 minutes. And I dated a young Marine fellow who was in the next barracks next door to me, and, you know, we had an illicit relationship, and it was nice, and I enjoyed it, and it was great. Until I found out that he was engaged to somebody, and we had to break it off, which was very bad. Once that happened, I received a lot of trouble within my command from particularly this older female, and it was always the women that hurt you more than the men, which was really odd, because you have this expectation that women are going to group together and be nice to each other. I don't know what it is about being in the military, but it just got really ugly really fast. I was relatively more attractive than she was, which I later realized a couple months ago, actually, from the grapevine of the military, is why she hated me. I didn't know for over 5 years why this woman hated me, but she made my life hell. Just absolute fucking hell. Everything I did was under her scrutiny. AC-1 Sutton, or whatever her last name is now. She kept getting married and divorced. I don't remember what her current name is, but if I didn't bathe after PT, I didn't like being naked in front of them because they would point things out, and they would say things like, wow, looks like someone's got a little jiggle in the trunk, so I stopped bathing in front of them. Because it was public bathing, and I was not very comfortable doing it, and she would just make my life hell. Her and her friends, she had a group of friends who were like that, would just follow me around and would just constantly, just small things, just pick and pick and pick and pick and pick and pick and pick. So no matter what I did, it was wrong. And I tried so hard. I tried so hard. I tried to be as professional as possible. That didn't work. I tried to be as, you know, relaxed as possible. That didn't work. I would throw myself into work and work as hard as I could, and that would make me annoying. I would smoke, and I smoked a lot even before I joined, and I would make friends out in the smoke pit, and it got weird there too. It was, no matter what I did, if I talked to somebody for longer than 5 minutes, I was obviously sleeping with them. And I would talk to the chiefs just because, we would have things in common or something, and I would talk to them and I would be fucking them. And because I worked hard, I made rank very quickly. And so I was making rank a lot faster, and it was attributed, people said, to the fact that I was sleeping with somebody. And I just remember waking up every day, hating myself, hating how I looked, hating everything about myself, and I didn't want to go to work. And so I'd find reasons to not go to work. I would find reasons to go somewhere else, be attached somewhere else, do something else. I would go find a door and work on it by myself. And eventually they said that my teamwork was lacking. And during this time of me first being there was when I went to, a buddy of mine took me to a strip club for my 18th birthday, I think. Either my 18th birthday or my 19th birthday. My 19th birthday in April. And we went to a strip club, and they wanted to get me away from the barracks, and there was a guy there and his buddies, and they thought that I was one of the strippers, and apparently that was a compliment. I don't know. And I didn't want to give him my number. He gave me the creeps. And my buddy, whose name was also Jessica, gave him my number, and he just contacted me, and contacted me, and contacted me, and contacted me. He was a good-looking guy, He was slightly older, and he was a Marine from up the road. He was one of the recon guys.
Okay.
So he was in recon training. And eventually he came over to see me at my barracks because he was led on base because he has a base ID. And we had relations for the first time, and at first it was a wanted experience, and then it was an unwanted experience. Ended with me being tied up and having pictures taken of me. And it was new and exciting, and I was young, and I thought maybe this is what it's supposed to be like between a man and a woman. Maybe this is what modern sexuality is supposed to be like. Maybe I'm a prude for not enjoying this. And he was very manipulative. And his name was Tim. And Tim would be the bane of my existence until now. And this is when I met the worst person I've ever met in my entire life. And he did very bad things to me on a regular basis. And I was stuck with him. I couldn't get rid of him. I would try to break up with him, and he would find ways to insinuate himself amongst my friends. And I was pretty much under his thumb. Now, I know part of that's my fault for not being able to break out, but it was very bad. And I would drive up the hour and a half to go see him at the northern tip of Camp Pendleton, and I would get very tired. I would miss work. Bad things would happen. I just lost all of my military motivation. I was so in this guy's control. We ended up going underway once, for a couple of weeks on the Bonhomme Richard to do some training exercises. And he ended up borrowing my car, crashing it. It was repoed. Not repoed, but it was hauled away. And I ended up being in debt for it. And it got back to my dad. And my dad's like, what the fuck is this guy doing with your vehicle? Meanwhile, I'm on the ship surrounded by people who hate my guts, who are quite determined to make sure that I look as bad as humanly possible. And so I'm having a miserable time on the ship for a couple of months, and having a miserable time with my significant other person while he's destroying my things at home. And the Canadian Army ended up coming on board because this was RIMPAC, Rim of the Pacific, which is where you go down to Hawaii. And this was over that summer.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely talk about that. What
RIMPAC is where you get all the different navies around the world, and you all come together and throw a big party after doing a whole bunch of exercises around Hawaii. It is fun as hell. It is awesome. You pull up into Hawaii, and it is great. It is great. I loved it. It was awesome. And I had so much fun, and we had the Canadian Army on board. There was a lovely Canadian gentleman on board there who also liked hockey, had similar interests to me, knew where I was from in Spokane, Washington, which is right by the Canadian border there. We had similar interests and the rest of it, and, Tim was being a jerk, so I broke up with him. Sent the Dear John home and said, you need to stop crashing my crap, we're done. I ended up going out. The Canadian Army had an extra room in a 5-star hotel in Honolulu. Yeah, it was great. So me and my new gentleman friend saying, I'm lonely, you're lonely, let's get going. And we ended up having relations quite a few times during that time period. I ended up getting so drunk. I'm 18 years old, mind you. I ended up getting so drunk with the Canadian Army. And it was great. It was awesome. But I ended up passing out in the pool. Next to the pool, in the shade. I woke up 6 hours later after drinking an entire bottle of champagne to myself. Thank you very much. I ended up waking up 6 hours later in the sun, covered in a sunburn from top to bottom. 3rd-degree burns. I still can't feel, I don't know which is the worst, or the first, or third, second, or third, but whatever.
3rd degree. Excuse me, I think 3rd degree is the worst.
Whatever causes nerve damage, I still can't feel my shins.
That'd be that.
And part of my nose peeled off, and that was pretty funny. But so I got really badly sunburned. And you know what the nice Canadian man did? Instead of ditching the poor floozy, that he was just sleeping with for this deployment only, which happens. Okay, let's be honest here, it happens. And instead of ditching me, he very, very graciously and kindly applied aloe vera to my poor chafed body, and I said, go get drunk with your friends. Just leave the floozy, go find a friend. Leave me here. I'll struggle on alone. Go without me. He says, the man doesn't leave a woman behind. And he put the... A very romantic gesture. Terrible lover. Absolutely terrible. But he was companionable, and that's all I needed, you know?
So there's almost a greater sense of camaraderie between you and a foreign military than within your own ranks.
Exactly, which was odd, and I got a lot of flack for that. I remember walking down the street, and there was a Scotsman. I was walking down the street, there's a Scotsman, right? And I say, absolutely lovely, you have lovely legs. And he says, you are not so bad looking yourself. And he turns around and he flashes me, and I was like, even better. And like me and my female friends who were coming with me, because we all have to stay together as a Liberty Party.
Okay.
Which you find secret ways of breaking apart. You know, not supposed to, but you do. And, you know, he flashes us, and he got a standing applause from everybody. And he's, you know, because the Scotsman does not wear anything underneath his kilt.
Okay.
That's the answer, by the way, if someone says, what does the Scotsman wear under his kilt? The answer is nothing. I knew that now. But it was just a feeling of, you know, when I was out with other foreign military, they treated their women better, which I thought was odd, you know, but worse at the same time. They have different issues. But it was odd because I was actually able to go out and drink and smoke and have fun with these people and be able to make jokes and crack jokes about being an American and a Canadian, and the rest of it is like, Canada has an army? Oh yeah, we will show up to your house and darn your socks and then apologize for sticking you with a needle. You know, so we had, so it was fun. Got very drunk with the Australians, you know. It was just good times. But back at the ship, I got a lot of flack for that, for being loose, for being, well, 18. And I didn't like being in the same room with them, especially for watch. So when I specialized with the TBMCS, which happened about the same time, they sent me to a special school. Did you switch out your tapes?
Oh no, I was gonna say, just for clarification, was the TBM? I'm sorry, what was the TBM?
TBMCS, which is Theater Battle Management Combat System.
Okay.
It is a system in which it takes all of the flight data coming off of ships, especially big decks like the Bonhomme Richard and Tactical 12. And what it does is it correlates all this data so the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Air Force, and foreign navies can see what we're doing. You type in the data, you plug it in a certain way, and then you get all the information that you need. And it also works for the artillery support for the Marine Corps detachment that's on board. Okay.
And you said you went to a special school for that.
Correct.
Where'd you go for that?
Point Loma, which is in San Diego as well. That's by the sub base. So when you go to the submarine base, instead of turning left on the submarine base, you turn right, there's Point Loma. So that's where our schoolhouses are.
Oh, okay.
And people specialize in different things. Now, the air traffic controllers thought that what I was doing was the dumbest thing on the planet. But I loved it. It was great. I was able to work with the system. It was a Unix system. I understood Unix. Unix and I understand each other. I eventually became a systems administrator, which means that I was working with the hardcore hardware and software of the data, so I became an all-encompassing expert on this piece of equipment. The officers loved it. I was able to work underneath a Lieutenant Commander Martinez, one of the greatest people I've ever met. And so it was just me and an officer working together, which I found was a much better thing in which I could work myself to death. I loved working. Just not with the other air traffic controllers, because they were mean at me. So, yeah, it just sounds so trite, but if it's your daily life, because you sleep with these people too, by the way, you like
Right.
in the same berthing.
Right.
They're always right next to you. And having someone stand over you and tell you that your choice in deodorant and toothpaste is disgusting and you're disgusting for using it, day in and day out, and having them control your evals and having them control your life. One of them actually said that because I spoke so quickly, and I'm always very energetic, as I am as a person, said that I was not allowed to drink Red Bull anymore. That small, tiny shit that you would never experience in the civilian sector was happening on a regular basis, and I could not figure out why. And it was mind-numbing, and it was demoralizing.
So, I mean, are there any real channels to confront any of that harassment, or not really?
Did you call that harassment? They didn't call it harassment. They called it just basic being, No.
No.
No. If they're considered a better sailor than you, regardless of what they do, there's nothing for you to do. And I tried to explain this to other members of our group, and I didn't do a very good job. I wasn't savvy enough yet. I wasn't grown up enough yet. So it pretty much just sounded like I was whining, She's picking on me, is what it sounded like.
Right.
But what they couldn't understand was, while you're in it, and it's happening, and everything that you do, your personal life, every word that comes out of your mouth is being scrutinized that way, towards the negative, and then if you have to confide anything in your higher people, because she was in charge of me, if you have to confide in them at all, then they're the only person to confide in. If you accidentally get knocked up, if anything happens, if you date a sociopath, like I did, it's awful. And then it didn't help. It didn't help at all that I was pretty much a terrible sailor. You know what I mean? So that wasn't helping me much.
Right.
I would try to get out of stupid work, which a lot of people would just bite the bullet. Which is what you're supposed to do, is bite the bullet and do it. And I would say, no, I just built that door. I'm not going to tear it down and redo it. No. So I would lie and say, oh yeah, totally, I redid that. Totally redid it.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I was just standing outside next to it, holding a paintbrush, smoking a cigarette, just being like, I am not repainting this door. I painted it correctly the first time. I am not doing it. It looks fine. And they would never tell the difference. So I was just like, nope, not doing it.
Okay. So we're into 2009. Are we getting close to 2010 at this point?
RIMPAC was that summer. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a deployment, which was the turning point of my life.
Okay. And would you mind talking about this deployment? Actually, how about we change tapes first, because I'm guessing that...
Yeah, so let's pause here. I need to use the restroom anyway.
Okay. Okay, so where we left off is we were just talking about you were going to go into your deployment, and this would be more of your wartime experience.
Yeah, wartime experience. I want to go into first the difference between what it's like to be a support group as a part of wartime, especially if you're on an ocean. Because a lot of what war movies you see, especially within our culture today, is you see a lot of war movies of people who are boots on ground, who are doing those types of things, and you see a lot of people who are doing the straightforward war, meaning so-and-so shoots at something, right? But there are the support divisions. There are people like my father, who was stationed in Alaska for 2 years. He was gone for the first 2 years of my life, or a year and a half, or a year, I don't remember. But he was stationed up in Alaska, where he would have to listen in on the Russians. And when he first checked in on his station, he listened, and they said, oh, how's it going, Airman Guy Sanders Thayer? Congratulations on the birth of your daughter. And then you sit there, and his job is to listen. He's not transmitting, so he's just receiving. And so his job is to listen, and you spend 8 to 12 hours listening for something. Waiting. Now, the difference between World War II and now is that we're doing a whole lot of monitoring and waiting. Now, with the culture behind you growing up, especially hearing war stories from Grandma and Grandpa of Vietnam, of World War II, of the rest of it, there is a lot of waiting, and it is hard, but there's fighting. There's something happening. You are part of that. You are part of the war on terror. You were part of something, you know what I mean?
Yep.
When I joined the Navy, I was expecting more small ship things of my expectation of me and my brothers and sisters in arms, and we were going to go in and fight the enemy. What a lot of my military experience was boredom and how to manage it. The psychological tedium is just as damaging. And it feels weird to say that, because you have the people who are going to war and coming back and are traumatized by shell shock, by things that people can understand. But what they don't understand is the trauma of being away from home and feeling helpless in the middle of an ocean. There's not, in Afghanistan, you can turn and walk away somewhere. You can get away from the rest of you can't really get away from them, obviously, if you're surrounded by enemy fire and the rest of it and walk away, but you could. Hypothetically, you could,
right.
You know? You could get up, stretch your arms and legs, and walk somewhere, right? And even if it's the desert, you can still keep walking and still keep going and find something. If you're on a boat, you cannot escape. You are stuck with the people who are surrounding you, and you cannot leave. Other people run your life from 0000 until 2359. You have no privacy. Where you sleep, I was in a berthing with 250 other women. When you go to work, you are constantly cheek by jowl surrounded by other people. There is no privacy. And with a need for closeness, you get very close bonds with the other people around you. And anything that you say, or anything that you feel or think, is immediately broadcast to every single person on the ship. So whether your ship is filled with 2,000 people, or whether your ship is 200 people, you get to know these people very, 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 very well. Very, very, very intimately. And what that closeness does is it's a crucible of human nature. Racism becomes 10,000 times harder to deal with. Sexism gets 10,000 times worse. Distill human nature down and amplify it. Negatives and positives, and amplify it by a million. That's what it's like. You are steeped in humanity all the time, and there's no relaxation, there's no escape. You cannot escape it, period. You can't even jack off in privacy just to relieve the tension. There is none, you cannot do that. And even if you do, it's with the understanding that you will be caught. With that understanding, also remember that as I'm leading up to this deployment, I am going with people who hate my guts. So these are people who hate me on a regular basis. And when I deal with people who hate me on board the ship, within my division, you know, at the end of the day, when I would go home from work, you know, I would go back home to a man who did very bad things. And I'm going to go into further depth about that, of what that relationship was like. And this is leading up to that summer when I was getting ready to deploy. So during that time frame of me meeting this individual, going on my small RIMPAC, which is very short, coming back and the rest of it, I came back and he was very upset that I had had relations with other gentlemen while I was underway. So not only was I receiving flack from that, at work, I was receiving flack from that from him. He would do very, very bad things. He was a recon trainee, but it looked like he was going to get out. And he was formerly in the Navy, I learned that. And he was in the Navy for a good couple of years. And he ended up being kicked out for therapy because he was an alcoholic. And he rejoined the Marine Corps, which means that you have to start all over again. If you join from any branch in the Marine Corps, you start all over again from boot camp. There's no keeping your rank, there's nothing. So, he was considerably older than I was. And I was just learning about myself as a human being, sexually, mentally, physically, all the things that you do to learn about yourself as a young person. And he was very good at manipulating that. When I tried to break up with him, he would go on my Facebook page. I eventually learned he had my computer's key logged. He would do bad things and video record it and use it as blackmail against me. And the thought that I was physically enjoying these things, but mentally it was very, very debilitating, was just awful. It was just absolutely awful. Hating myself every single day, and then not being able to escape. There was nowhere I could go. I can't just pack up and move to a new town. And I loved being in the military. That was my biggest identity. That is my only identity still, to this day. was being in the military, and now I don't even have that to fall back on. But during that time period, we ended up moving out into Valley Center, which was about an hour and a half north. I would drive an hour and a half every day, but it was in the middle of nowhere, where he could control me more, and I would spend all day and night with him there, and he would give me drugs and do things to me, but also have it video recorded. And he would go out and he would tell me about things about how, you know, books like The A-Game, you know, where it teaches men how to manipulate women into sleeping with them. You know, the hunter mentality about women, how you insult them slightly first so they become interested in you, and then you sleep with them, and then you discard them, ways to discard women, and the rest of that. And he would read those books aloud to his buddies. And I eventually started dressing sluttier and sluttier, and I was just losing myself. I wasn't myself anymore. And I felt myself being gone, and then I would go to work, and it would be worse there, and there was no escape. And I was also very depressed and receiving medication and therapy for that, but it was on the down low. You know, they didn't want you to, I didn't want to lose my clearance. My clearance was the one thing that I had to maintain in order to keep my job. And I would do anything, deal with anything, put up with anything to keep my clearance, because I loved my job. When it came down to it, hated the people in charge of me were absolutely cruel and unusual towards me. I was annoying, you know, looking back on it. Sometimes I can hardly blame them, but I loved my job. I loved being in the military, and I thought that if I just kept hanging on, I would eventually find another job within the military that I could love as much as my father loved his job and have that camaraderie. But no matter where I went, my reputation followed. That because I had relations with gentlemen folk when I was 18 years old, it followed me. No matter what happened, even after I got married, even after I had children, even after I became a different person, I grew up. Even after that happened, it follows me to this day. And it sucks to be 25, to about, no, I'm 25 or 26, and still have that follow me around as it being a bad thing and not being able to explain myself or explain what happened like I am now in depth to almost everybody that you meet is frustrating and very painful. Anyway, so I'm under Tim's thumb, and his form of damage was more psychological than it was anything else, and I was whittled down to nothing. And even after he was removed from recon because he broke, you know, he would take that out on me. He would get drunk frequently. I'd have to take care of that. Say and do awful things. He would pinch me in certain places and tell me that I was fat, even when I wasn't, and he would just whittle me away little by little. And I eventually found out that he was married. And when you're in the military, you know everybody's pay, right? So I was paying for most of everything. I'm losing money on this guy left and right. I've got no money. I am broke all the time. I shouldn't be. I was an E4 at that point. I had BAH, which is basic allowance for housing. And I was broke all the time paying for his expensive tastes and going out to places with him. He liked to go to clubs and things and ride around his motorcycle, and it was hard. And he was a lower rank than I was, so I knew exactly how much he made. But it turned out he was married, which means that he was receiving all this BAH and wasn't helping pay for things. And for some reason, finding that out on a credit report really snapped me out of it. And I found that out just after he left for Afghanistan. So he leaves for Afghanistan, and I was going to wait for him to come home, even though I was deploying like a month after he left, and that I would be back after he came back, because our deployments ended up being the same length. And so I was at home, you know, expecting for him to come back. And then I finally saw that on the credit report, he was married. There was a Mrs. Neal. They weren't divorced. They weren't separated. They were married. And she broke it off with him, sent him away, and he would not divorce her. He refused. So finally I said, look, it's either me or her. Divorce her. And he did. And for some reason that comforted me, like, oh, I'm special, you know. When you're in a situation like that, when the small things that make you feel special are blown out of proportion, just like you minimize the bad things. It's like, yeah, he's an alcoholic and he hits me, but, you know, he at least broke it up with his wife for me. It's just as disgusting as it feels. It sounds just as it feels. And so that was my home life, and that was what it was like. And this is me just before I deployed, and I found out that he was doing all sorts of other bad things. He was dealing spice, which is a... do you know what spice is?
Yeah, it's a... Well, I mean, you can explain it really quick.
Yeah, it's a drug that wasn't popping up on drug tests amongst the military community for people who liked weed and wanted to get high. And he ended up giving it to me as in the form of a cigarette. He said that he had a new form of cigarette, and I ended up smoking it, and it was on camera. These are all things that he has hours upon hours upon hours of me being raped, of me taking drugs, of me having sex while on drugs, of him introducing other people to have sex with me without me knowing while I'm passed out, and now he has me taking another illicit drug on tape. And I'm broke. I ended up getting knocked up before, this is all in the interim, but I ended up getting knocked up, and I had a 3-day or a 4-day weekend, and I was staying at a buddy's apartment to save money. This is before we moved into the house. I found out I was pregnant with his kid, and he kept saying he can't have kids because he had a torsion to one of his testicles, which means it was twisted. So he's saying that he couldn't produce children, and I'm pregnant, and so he's calling me a whore by saying I was sleeping with somebody else. And I said, look, man, no, I wasn't. I haven't been, and I'm pregnant with your kid. And he howled and blamed me for it and kept making jokes about pushing me downstairs and stuff to solve everybody's problems. And I took it as, he's joking, but I felt that it was... I felt I knew what position I was in, and I was young and in love. No matter how bad he was, I was in love with him. And that sucked even more. And my own family couldn't dig me out. I couldn't dig myself out. And I had a 4-day weekend, and I decided that I couldn't afford the $200 abortion. I couldn't go to my chain of command because of them, and I couldn't do anything else about it. And so I had sleeping pills, and I had my antidepressants, and I had cold medicines, and I wanted to make sure that I would never be found until Monday rolled around and I didn't show up to work, and I knew that Nate, the guy I was living with, was going to be gone. And I went into my room, into my air mattress, and I took all of them. I drank them all down. I drank all of the cough syrup, everything I can get my hands on. I wanted to make sure that if I was going to abort this baby, that I was going with it. I had this weird image of me in the afterlife with the baby and everything was going to be fine, but I was not going to live and have a baby with this monster. He was a very, very bad man. He was not going to be the father of my child. So help me. And I woke up 3 days later. No one had found me. I had vomited everything up, and I was unconscious. And I had effectively aborted myself, which was part one of the goal. But I remember waking up a few hours before I had to start getting ready to go to work and thinking, why not me? What the fuck? Why not me? Why couldn't I go too? I can't dig myself out of this. I can't show my face at work on Monday. I can't do this. What the fuck? And I felt like the biggest failure for not even being able to kill myself properly. Because everybody else has access to weapons and the rest of it. And I didn't want to go that way. I wanted to go by poison. And I wanted to be left alone and I wanted to be dead. I wanted it all to be over. And I woke up. And life went on. And I went to work. Life sucked there. I went home. Life sucked there. I went to work, and it sucked. I went home, and it sucked. And there was nothing I could do. I had betrayed the trust of my family. I had betrayed the trust of my friends. I had done awful things trying to get out from underneath Tim. I had tried, after that, I had tried sleeping with other men. I had tried sleeping with other women. I had tried... Oh, I'm a terrible alcoholic, by the way. I can't drink alcohol. Like, I get a couple sips in, and my body says you're done. So I couldn't even be an alcoholic appropriately. You know what I mean? Like, all the usual ways that people drown themselves in their sorrows. I can't even do that, because I'm such a teetotaler. Yeah. It's funny looking back on it. It was just like, I can't even get drunk properly. This is bullshit. So not only can I not kill myself effectively, I can't even get drunk. I can't even be the noble sailor who goes off and gets drunk and drowns in her sorrows. You know, when they write my biography, it'll be great, because I'll be the... During this time, she had suffered with alcoholism. Oh, that's too bad. You know, instead it was like, you're a terrible alcoholic, too. You suck. And that was... that was funny. But, finally something happened, and he's in Afghanistan, and I just had enough. And I was just like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done. Send him the Dear John. Now, this is a big deal in the military. When you send someone to Dear John, especially when they just get to Afghanistan, you are the worst human being on the planet. You are that whore, you are that skank, you are that bitch. You are awful. You are a terrible human being. No matter how awful they are at home, they could beat the crap out of you, they could strangle your children, they could cut off your tit and sell it on the market. Whatever they do, if you send a Dear John to a guy who's in Afghanistan, you are a horrible, awful human being. Period. End of story. So I did. I got up the courage and I sent him the Dear John and I said, you and I are done. I hate your guts. You've done nothing but awful things to me. You make me do things I don't want to do. I hate you. We're done. Right? Oh, but that wasn't the end of him. Oh, no. I ended up, so we're getting ready. There's things called workups before you go out on the ship. You have to make sure things are working. You do exercises with the other people in your fleet, whatever, right? And I ended up meeting this other Marine a long time ago while with Tim. And this guy was a musician. And he was in a different Marine unit. And his name was Rocky Garrity. And he was my soulmate. He is. He's quite dead now, but he was my soulmate. So when people say, are you married to your soulmate? And I said, you know, I met that guy once. He was kind of an asshole. That's me jokingly referring to Rocky. And he was young too. I can't blame him. Anyway, so we met on one of the workups before deploying. I had just broken it off with Tim, and I met him within a couple of weeks. And it was love at first sight. He had recognized me from a party before. We were at the same party in the same barracks that me and Tim were at together, and he knew that I was with Tim, but he was playing a Pearl Jam song, and I knew all the words. And Pearl Jam is a big deal in my life. Eddie Vedder is the voice of my father singing lullabies to me when I was a baby. It is the story of my life, can be done with Pearl Jam albums, in which it takes me back to Washington, it takes me back to a time when my mom and dad were together, it takes me back to a time when I was peaceful by myself, times when I'm sad, it was the silver lining, times when I'm angry, I can be angry, you know, Eddie Vedder is the voice of my life. I've always wanted to write him a letter to tell him that, but, and he loved Pearl Jam just as much as I did, and he played guitar, and he sang very much like my father did. We agreed on things, and we clicked, and it was love, and it was good. And it was pure. It wasn't tainted with, you know, taking advantage of me. It wasn't tainted with, you only wanted me for my body, you know. It was good. And he was good. He was one of the very few good souls of a man that I've ever met. And we were good for each other. He was a little young, a little immature. Like, he would show up late to things, you know, like he would say he'd be somewhere and then he wouldn't show up, and I would get pissed off at him and be like, hey man, show up, motherfucker. He was one rank above Tim, but Tim got word that I broke up with him. He called me once from Afghanistan, which is, by the way, the most heartbreaking thing on the planet, to have to tell someone, because he hadn't received a letter yet. And Rocky grabbed the phone from me. He says, look, motherfucker, you did horrible things to her, and she's done with you now. Click. That was Tim's one phone call. Done. That's why I feel like a heel. For some reason, I still feel like I owe this guy something, you know? Rocky and I were going to be on the ship together. It turns out that he was transferred to my ship, and so I was going to see him the entire deployment, and that was awesome.
What ship was that on?
The Bonhomme Richard.
Okay.
LHD-6.
Okay.
And we were getting ready for that deployment, and it was going to be a 6-month-long deployment turned into an 8-month-long deployment turned into a 10-month-long deployment. It just kept going and going. And we're finally on this thing. I am TBMCS trained. The people going with me are all the ones who hate my guts. This deployment's gonna suck. But Rocky's gonna be on the ship with me, and it's gonna be great. But now we have to play the game. What time is it now for? Now we get to play the game where We have to pretend like we're not dating while still maintaining a relationship. So, that's awesome. And hard. You can't sleep on the ship. You can. People do. All over the ship. All the time. It's always happening. At one point or another, someone's fucking on that ship. I didn't want to, because I wanted to keep our relationship sleaze free. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be not sneaking around. I wanted it to be good. While I was on that ship, Tim decided that he was going to write and send all sorts of videos and nasty letters to my chain of command. So now I'm being investigated. Tim is doing all sorts of awful things, and my coworkers are giving me a bunch of flack because I'm working more with TBMCS across the room from where they are, and I'm separating myself as much as humanly possible from them. I will not PT with them. I would not eat with them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to look at them. I still have to stand watch with them for 8 hours a day, but I hate their guts. They have hurt me enough, and I didn't want to deal with it. And it was just bad. I was avoiding them. They didn't like it. They said, oh, well, she's just skipping out on watch. I was still working. I would make myself work ridiculous hours. I would find ways to fix and improve TBMCS, and when it broke down, you knew that I was on that thing like white on rice. I was on that thing. I would sit there and be typing it. Now, there was a group of people from Anglico who were working behind me. They were in the same, there was their space, I was just borrowing it, and it was a group of Marines. And it was an all-male division, so I was the only woman that they saw on a regular basis. And working behind me was a person of the same rank, and his name was Sergeant Oudbier. As you notice, that is now my last name. I met my husband for the first time, but we'll get to that. Okay. So while I'm dealing with all of this other crap, and I'm trying to maintain a war that we're waging and the rest of it, we're heading towards the Gulf of Aden. So now I'm stuck in the crucible of the ship, right? I'm receiving nothing but letters. Tim has now returned home. Tim has destroyed all of my personal belongings. Tim has, either him or my roommate has taken my vehicle, which was an Audi. I loved my Audi. It was an A4. Oh, I love that vehicle. My precious Audi, and wrapped it around a tree. My roommate's in prison now because he was growing weed at my house. Okay. So Tim gets back, there's weed growing all over the house. My dog is dead. My cats are dead. All of my stuff is being sold and the rest of it and destroyed, and my personal life is now gone. He has contacted all my friends on Facebook, told them what an awful whore that I am, saying all things like I'm diseased, which I wasn't, and a whole bunch of other things, and he's doing all these bad things, contacting my command, and finally I'm being investigated. And they're saying, are these things true? And now I'm dragging my personal life to a man who hates my guts, which would be the investigation officer, which was Ensign, oh god, what was his name? Anyway, the guy was strange. I don't remember his name. Anyway, I thought he was a buddy of mine, but it turns out he hated my guts too because he was listening to the first class, and I just felt like I never got a break. And some of it I deserved for being a shitty sailor. I was indeed a shitty sailor for the first couple months that I was there, and working hard, and failing, and being annoying, and getting in trouble, and getting out of trouble. I don't think I deserved it that much, though. And it got worse. And worse. As Tim, it turns out, had spies on the ship. So even when I was sent, when something bad would happen, when someone would yell at me or hurt my feelings, he would send me a letter, well, you deserved it because X, Y, and Z, and he knew all my buttons. So I'm being watched 24/7. Rocky, on the other hand, he's on the other end of the ship, in a completely different unit. He's being tortured in his own special way. He's got his boss is writing his ass. This is his last deployment before he gets out. He's getting ready to go on to Africa for training and the rest of it, and he's getting ready to do that. The guys who I'm working with behind me, including my now husband, Matthew Oudbier, and they're getting ready to go to Africa as well. They're all leaving the ship, which is blessed peace after they're all crap stuck in a ship. The worst thing you could do to a Marine is stick them on a ship with sailors who are trained to deal with boredom and have a job to do, but the Marines don't, and they're miserable. They're like crouching tigers crammed into a teeny tiny cage. God, they get destructive. They break shit. It is bad. It is bad. They get into fights. They sleep with the women. The women sleep with them. Pent up weirdness all over the place, and there's not much they can do about it. Anyway, that's what happens when you stick Marines on a ship. I don't think we should ever have them on ships. Ever, 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 ever. Unless they have a distinct reason to be there, no. We should fly them and drop them out of the planes. We should never, ever, ever keep them on a ship. Hear that, Congress? Never on a ship. They break shit. Anyway. So the Marines are on the ships with us, and they're about to leave, and we're all kind of getting excited about them getting off the goddamn ship. Just get off the ship. They're going to be going to Afghanistan and other places, and they'll be dispersed, gone, thank goodness. And we're mainly just making sure that we're just ferrying them across the water. And at this time period, during this time period, Siraki's getting a lot of flack, and we're heading into Thailand. Once we get into Thailand, I get to spend some quality time with him, and we're having a lovely time together, and it's great. And he ends up getting in trouble for it, and that sucks. It turns out that Tim, while he is at home, at our home, up in Valley Center, has also destroyed Rocky's prize guitar, and for him, that's a big deal. He had built that guitar from scratch and the rest of it, so Rocky's having a hard time with me. We're writing letters back and forth through messengers over the ship, because I refuse to sleep with him on the ship. I always wait for a Liberty port, you know. I want to keep it romantic, damn it. And spend time in Thailand, and that's all well and good. And things get worse on the ship. And they get steadily worse and worse and worse for both of us. And we make it to, over Christmas, Sergeant Oudbier behind me goes to Djibouti, Africa, which simultaneously is where my uncle was. He was the XO. So he was actually my dad's best friend was there, and he was the XO of one of the bases that was there, so it was kind of odd to have, you know. And then other family members were also in the Gulf at that time, the Gulf of Aden, and we were also there at the same time. And so it was funny, we almost had their Thanksgiving and Christmas in the Gulf. And Grandma was upset about that because we weren't coming home. And I said, well, Grandma, you're the only one missing. Why don't you come over here? Pick a base and stick with it. We'll meet you. You know, it was a joke. But and so we ended up, after that, things got even weirder. Things got even weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder. And I'm trying to do TVMCS stuff. And it turns out that we were doing some operations that I will not go into on this video in Yemen. And here's the weird part about being in the military now as opposed to then, is that you don't really have an enemy. And so for us, we're just floating around in the water doing circles and turns, and us and staff know a little bit more than the people who are working on the ship, just because of where we work. And we know that we're doing operations, we know that we're sending out strike fighters, but everyone's compartmentalized away from each other. So if someone were to torture me right now, they wouldn't get much other than that day we had lasagna, and it was burnt, and it sucked. But I remember specifically one of my officers turning around. He was a major in the Marine Corps. And he turned to us and he said, a lot of people are not going to be waking up tomorrow. And you know, but you don't know. The weird part about murdering people, and I spent a lot more time doing this, and I won't go into that on video, is when you murder people via something that feels like a video game. You know, when you know that you're setting up the times for the aircraft to get their stuff ready, and you're setting up the times for them to go, and you know the pilots who are going, and you crack jokes about them bringing a pizza back, and you're sending the Marines out and the rest of it, and you're getting ready for mass-scale murder. I'm not even going to call it killing. I'm not even going to call it casualties, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this shit. It's fucking murder, okay? And the sooner we can accept that, I think the better off we're going to be as a society. People were murdered. And they're dead now, and they're never coming back. Women and children. Babies, toddlers, just like my own children. Women who are just like me trying to figure out what to make for dinner the next day. They're dead, and they're never coming back. And these men who are fighting wars against us, they have no idea what's coming at them. Rockets coming from the sky. They are dead. And you don't feel anything. Target was hit. I had the hiccups. And you hear the stories from the Marines coming back when they get back on the ships, and you hear them talk about things and how they were scared of something happening, and you are completely numbed out from being bored on the ship for months. You are numb, and you don't care, and you feel like you should, and you don't, and then you hate yourself because you don't. You don't feel jack shit. Anyway, they get back on board. We end up going out into Liberty ports. We pull into Malaysia, and Rocky goes off and gets drunk with his friends, and he doesn't come back. And I'm trying to find him. I have a global phone. I got the global chip so that no matter where we went, I would be able to make cell phone calls. It was stupid expensive, and I didn't give a fuck. I had pulled most of Tim's account. Most of his bank account to pay for all the debt that I had accrued while dating him shortly after we were broken up. I pulled out half of it. I didn't want to leave him broke. I didn't want to leave him homeless, even though I had much more debt due to him than that. And he was writing back saying that I stole his money, that I wiped his accounts, and I said, no, I left you more than was enough for your motorcycle and the rest of it. And he says, well, your roommate destroyed all that. And I said, you have to take that up with him. He's in prison. I'm just screaming and crying as I'm receiving these pieces of information that my entire life at home is gone. I'm now homeless. There's been weed found in my house, for fuck's sake. I'm going to prison. You know? Like, yeah. I'm losing my military career. I'm losing my job. It's all going downhill. Everything sucks. Matthew Oudbier gets back from Djibouti shortly after Christmas. His wife had left him. And we were standing on the smoke pit, and he shed one tear. His wife couldn't hack being a Marine Corps wife. So over Christmas, and he received it during one of the Christmas runs for packages, he received his tear, John. And he loved that woman. He would sit and he would write letters, and he would write poetry, and he would draw pictures of her, and he was just... I respected Sergeant Oudbier more than any other human being other than my father. He was a good stand-up man, and I never looked at him that way because I knew he was dedicated to his wife, and he was an attractive individual. I thought he had a nice back. The Marine Corps uniforms are good at making men look very shapely. I don't know what it is. They can turn a fat sausage into something attractive, but, you know. Something about that uniform, man. It just makes men look good. And so I went and smoked with Sergeant Oudbier, and my heart went out to him, and my heart broke for him. He was a good man. He didn't deserve that. It's my alarm telling me to wake up.
Oh. Just picking up where we left off.
So, this is all kind of convoluted because a lot of bad things happened very quickly, and my brain kind of broke. I was under a lot of stress from work, from not sleeping, from working my ass off, and from people that I worked with, and from lots of things. So I kind of get the times and dates mixed up. So we end up going into Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Rocky disappears. I have a global phone. I keep trying to call him. Bad things are happening. He's dealing it with the best way he can, which is going off and getting drunk with his friends. I'm not hearing from him. I'm depressed as fuck. My home life is destroyed. My family's upset with me. Everything is falling apart. I go back to the ship. And I sit there, and I'm sitting in my office that I share with Sergeant Oudbier, and I am crying. Just bawling. I couldn't contain it anymore. I'm by myself finally in that space because everyone's off the ship, except for me, and I'm crying. And it's just bad. This is fat girl dropped her ice cream bawling, okay? This is awful. Face is not pretty at all. Red splotches, snot coming out of the face. And Sergeant Oudbier comes in, and he sees me, and he says, you know what? We need to get off the ship. We've been working hard. Let's get off this ship. And we get dressed in our Sunday best. And we both dress up nicely. And we go on a date. We go out for breakfast. And we talk about life. Breakfast turns into lunch. Lunch turns into a bookstore, and like an ancient Chinese bookstore. And we're walking around arm in arm in Kuala Lumpur. We're in a cab. We end up holding hands. One thing leads to another. And by nightfall, we have conceived our first child. And I've decided that if Rocky's not going to show up for his... Don't worry about it. If Rocky's not going to show up for any sort of date, then I'm done. I can't go through that again. dealing with a man who's not going to show up to dates and be responsible and the rest of it, so I'm breaking it off with Rocky. Rocky says, but I couldn't find you anywhere, and I'm like, that's not an excuse, you son of a bitch. So, moral of the story so far is, by the way, sleeping with people is not how you solve your problems. In case you didn't pick that up, don't do that. So, youth of America, yeah, it doesn't solve anything. But, I don't know I'm pregnant. I don't find out until 5 days before my 21st birthday. And I was told I couldn't have children anymore after that last miscarriage. I was told that I couldn't have children. I was told that my uterus was not going to be able to sustain life. Which, as a female, and you're told from birth that that is one of your primary functions in society is to have children. And that eventually you will become a mother, whether you like it or not. That's disheartening. And I accepted that, and I said, okay. And I was still on birth control, and it happened anyway. So now I'm homeless. I'm about to lose my job, my one career. My life is ending. And I'm knocked up by a married guy. And you hear about these things on, like, Jerry Springer. And people are like, oh my god, how does this drama happen? And it's like, I don't even understand how people can get into these situations and blah, blah, blah. Well, it happens. And it happens regardless of whether you're looking for drama or not. I'm usually pretty straightforward about things. It's like I could draw very simple instructions. I need food, I need sex, I need something to drink, I need this. These are things that I need. And it's April 1st, and I'm feeling nauseous and woozy, and they give me the pregnancy test. Matthew has known that I was pregnant. He could tell because I'm eating more, I'm getting moody and weepy. I don't eat usually when I'm on deployment. On deployment, my meal is cigarettes and Red Bull, and that is it. I have someone mail me Red Bull and cigarettes, and that is it. If I have time to eat food, I shovel it in my face, and I don't remember it other than the fact that eventually I have to evacuate it out of the system. Other than that, I don't eat, because I don't have time to. You're like, go down for chow. No, I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm going straight back to work. I don't have time for that. And the test came back on April 1st. I'm 20 years old. They say you're pregnant. And I picked up the stapler, and I threw it at him. I threw it at the officer, the medical officer, who just told me I was pregnant. And I'm screaming and I'm shouting at the top of my lungs, you're full of shit, this isn't funny, fuck you, who put you up to this, this isn't fucking funny, it's not possible, I hate you.
April 1st.
April 1st, yeah. Right? I said, this is not fucking funny, and my chief comes in and stops me. And says, you're pregnant, we have to fly you off the ship. Immediately. We are 2 weeks away from home. The only reason why a woman is flown off a ship amongst a group of Marines from Hawaii, we call it the flight of shame, because they know. Everybody knows within 5 minutes that I am pregnant, which is the worst thing you can do while on deployment. You have just become the sole reason why women will never be good enough for the military. I did everything I was supposed to. I didn't know that I was going to sleep with Matthew. I had no idea. I had no idea that we would end up comforting each other. I was on birth control. It was a one-off. I got knocked up. And there was no way for me to keep that information to myself and make a decision about it. I was pregnant, and therefore I was being kicked off the ship. So I took the flight of shame home from Hickam Air Force Base in Honolulu. Before I left, Matthew was in port with me in Hawaii because we just pulled in. And we drove around and we tried to figure out what we're going to do. And I said, well, I'm pregnant. And he says, I know. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he says, well, I like kids. I said, okay. And that's how I started dating my current husband. I like kids. Okay. When a woman gets flown off the ship, I end up taking the flight home 2 weeks early. Mind you, I am homeless. I have a sociopathic man who has sworn up and down that he's going to kill me the second he sees me. I am pregnant with a married man's child. I am sent home in disgrace. I don't want to talk to anybody. I didn't even tell my family. For 2 weeks I was in San Diego sleeping on a friend's couch, just weeping. Just openly weeping for 2 straight weeks. My family didn't know I was back in the States. They came on the day that Matthew was coming off the ship, and they wanted to congratulate me on my first deployment, my first full-length deployment. And they wanted to, you know, do the usual, welcome back, here's a fine meal, wine and dine, and the rest of it. And I ended up telling them the news with Matthew right there with me. By the way, I'm pregnant, here's the father. Yep, that's what happened. And I was transferred unceremoniously to TPU, which is the Transient Personnel Unit in San Diego, as pregnant female. And it was me and a bunch of other pregnant females. And the shame was so big, I couldn't handle it. That's when I started that's when my brain broke. Not for the first or last time, but that's when I knew that my career was not going to go the way that I wanted it to. Matthew and I moved into an apartment together, and we kind of did the reverse dating thing. Well, we have a kid now, I'm pregnant, let's get to know one another. And it was awkward. I'm at TPU. I show up for muster, get my dose of shame for the day, and go home. Until they send me to FACSFAC San Diego, and I didn't want to go. They gave me orders. FACSFAC San Diego is FACSFAC, which is Fleet Area Control Surveillance Facility. It's air traffic control tower. It's where we make sure that everybody off of the and off of San Diego, around that area, or in San Clemente Island, are all where they're supposed to be. We make sure that nobody's crashing into each other. The air traffic controllers on one side of the room. We call them air. They call us surface.
Okay.
And we sit in a cold, dark room for about 8 hours a day. Sound familiar? And that's what we do. And sit in the cold, dark room.
So, picking up where we left off, you've just been transferred to FACSFAC. You and Matt are back in the United States. So, just pick up right from there.
Mm-hmm. So now we're in the awkward situation where we have to figure out what we're going to do. Now that I'm pregnant, we're living in an apartment together. He has kindly provided a vehicle for me to use, and I am being treated well by a man for the second time in my life, which is new, and it's different. He's a different sort of man. Apparently he changed a lot, I heard later from his family, between when the person he was before and then when he got back from Iraq for the first time. And so I'm living with this individual who doesn't talk much, and I'm going through a lot of the fallout from being in the hands of Tim, and as I'm going through all of that, it's a very emotional time. But now I'm in a different place where I have a new job, I'm completely separated from my training, and I don't really know what else to do. And the rest of my career is really not that interesting, you know, after this point. My husband eventually deploys to Afghanistan while I'm pregnant with our second child. We decided to have 2 children back to back,
Okay.
which is heavily frowned down upon, because I was pregnant already from sea duty, and that is a very bad thing. It's a very shameful thing. They frown down upon it a lot. And I was sent to a pregnancy command where a lot of young women were going through a similar circumstance. And I ended up having my second child because I wanted to have my kids close together. That was a decision that I had made before I was told that I could not have children, was that if I was to have children, they would be close in age, and I would have all of my children back to back. I want to get that diaper stage done as quickly as humanly possible. And I wanted to make sure that my illegitimate bastard child, as beautiful as Rowan was, she was born in December 12th, 2010. Right after that, you know, all those shenanigans. And She, beautiful baby girl. She's 4 now. And I wanted her to have a sibling. And so 3 months after I gave birth to her, I ended up being pregnant again. And he left for Afghanistan shortly thereafter. And I worked odd hours while I was at FACSFAC. They had us working a rotating shift. And so on Mondays, I would work from 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Tuesday, the next day, I would work from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night. And then the next day, I would work from 10 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, or 8 in the morning.
Okay.
So it was a never-ending rotating shift. And then the next day I had off, meaning I was asleep for the whole day. And then the next day would be my other off day, which would be my one day to get things done. Interspersed between those days, I'd have to show up during the day for PT muster and the rest of this. And I fought that very hard because it was hard for me to sleep. I had issues sleeping, and having a rotating shift was very bad for me. It was bad for me psychologically. It was bad for me mentally. It was hard for me to keep my appointments. It was hard for me to go to therapy. It was hard for me to do anything with that schedule, and it was hard for me to be pregnant. It was hard for me to have a 1-year-old by myself. And on top of that, Tim was still threatening that he was going to come find me and kill me, and he was still in contact with my cousin, Richard, who lived up in Los Angeles, and my closest relative, and it was, with all of that happening, it was just bad. But I got through it. Matthew and I got through it together. We ended up moving to Base Miramar, you know, after I had the children, and then eventually I was transferred to my last ship. I had reenlisted. My last ship was going to be the New Orleans,
Okay.
and that was LPD 18, and I was transferred there, oh gosh, in November of 2013. And the ship was in dry dock and was getting ready to go. The first day that I showed up to the New Orleans, I was transferred there from FACSFAC to New Orleans. It was in dry dock, which means that the ship is being overrun by civilian contractors and is being, you know, that pretty much we have work on the barge, and I'm excited, and this is my first time joining as a regular OS to the fleet. Not staff, not anything else. I had asked for another staff position because I wanted to go back to working with something similar to TVMCS. And I got an email back from my, what is his name? The guy who gives you orders. What's his nuts? The guy who gives you your orders, and I got detailer, there we go. I got an email back from my detailer says, no, you have to go to these things out in the ocean that are gray called ships eventually. Well, fuck you two then. And I was very upset, you know, that's how he phrased it. And I was like, you have no idea how hard I worked for the Navy prior to getting knocked up. You know, it was very... I want to get back out there and get back to work, where I work mainly by myself, and I will do all the work that I can for you. But I'm an OS, and OSs go to ships. And that's the old school mentality of operations specialists. So...
Okay, so you re-enlist, and now this happens in 2012, 2013?
I think so.
Okay, so what does wind up happening? Do you go out?
We're in dry dock. My first day that I show up on the New Orleans, I meet my new comrades, and I said this is a new start for me, even though my reputation I know has already followed me from when I was, you know, new sailor, but now I'm OS2. I'm an E5. I have accomplished things, but I have no pins because I've never been out to sea. That's a big deal, by the way, to have pins. If you don't have pins, you are pretty much labeled a shitbag the second you walk on a ship, regardless of how much you say, I was staff, or I was stationed elsewhere. If you are an E5 without pins, you are a shitbag. So that is already a mark against you the second you walk on board.
Okay.
The fact that you have children is already a mark down on you, too, because the second you get sick, they don't go to daycare. So you have to go pick up your children, which is an issue I'm having with college right now, too, is having people understand that I have children, which is still apparently an anomaly. I don't know why that is, but whatever. So, I don't know why I'm having issues with my socks. I show up on the first day, and I meet my new co-workers, and we all end up working together, and they mention a song, and I mention that it sounds similar to a song that was written with the NWA. And I realized that I was the only female in this group, and I was also the only white person in this group. And we end up going down and cleaning something together, you know. So we're cleaning a space, because it's what you do when you're in dry dock, is you clean. You show up, you clean, and then you go home.
And where was dry dock?
San Diego.
Oh, it's still at San Diego,
Yep.
okay.
So we're on 32nd Street in San Diego, which anybody who's been stationed down there knows what I'm talking about, across the railroad tracks. Yeah. So we're there on the wet side, and we're cleaning, and I mentioned that a song by the NWA is similar, and they say, well, what's the NWA? And I said, oh, it's Niggas with Attitude. And they sang a song called Boys in the Hood, and then someone else redid it, which sounds similar to this song. I went to lunch, and I came back, and a first class pulled me aside and said, a couple of people, I know it's your first day, but a couple of people were saying that you were using the N-word, and we just don't appreciate that type of attitude here. And I looked at him and I said, those weak, punk-ass motherfuckers. No, here is what happened. And I told them what happened. And I said, this is what we were discussing. It was the name of a group. Okay? Number one. Number two, which punk-ass kid decided to come talk to you instead of talk to me and saying something at the moment? And he said, well, nobody said anything at the moment. No, nobody said a goddamn thing to me. That was my first encounter with the fleet. Was me being told, again, that I was racist. Now, before, when I was on the Bonhomme Richard, I had told a colleague of mine that she was wearing too much perfume. She called me that white bitch, that she was going to fucking kill me. She wasn't going to take shit from me. We went to A school together, so the fact that I made rank before her pissed her off. I don't know why, but it did. Probably because everybody assumed that I slept my way to the top. Okay. So, it was difficult for me, you know. She threatened to kill me, and then I was sent to anger management. And the doctor on board had me on so much Valium from all the stress that was going on that he said, there is no way in hell that you are possible of getting angry. What the hell? This is my encounter with every black person in the military. Unpleasant. So now I'm afraid of black people because I'm afraid I'm going to get yelled at. So that's another issue I have to deal with. Anyways, that was my first encounter with them, and it just got negative and downhill from there, where the fact that I had kids meant that occasionally I had to go home and take care of things, and it was frowned down upon that I had kids in the first place, and someone said, yeah, I heard about you, you got knocked up on deployment. It was just like, here we go. And it got worse. The chief liked me, though, so Chief Ackley liked me a lot, and he gave me plenty of work. And I worked my ass off organizing binders, I was working, and he just kept adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding, and we're getting ready to deploy. And we're finally at a dry dock, we're doing some exercises, I'm going underway. My husband got out of the military, you know, so he's going to be staying home with the kids. We're getting ready to do this, I'm getting really excited that I get to go underway and the rest of it, and I'm getting really excited. And I noticed that one of the guys within my division was kind of sniffing around one of the girls. And I saw her as myself, and I said, look, he's an older rank than you are. I understand that you can't straight up say no. Just don't do it, okay? And if he ends up doing something bad to you, if he ends up getting you drunk and putting you in a situation that you don't want to be in, you need to call me. Well, it happened. And I called out on it. I was shut down pretty hardcore. And I saw her life, and I saw my life, and I saw what it was going to be like. And I looked at my 22 pages of to-do, front and back. I was fighting hardcore because I was put in charge of security management, which means that I'm in charge of making sure the door is locked, making sure things are signed up, and the rest of it. It's a lot of tedium, you know. Yeah. But I was good at it, you know. And and we ended up being investigated for our things being breached, but it was a lot of mistakes that were made by somebody beforehand, and I ended up taking the fall for it. Where I was like, look, I don't know what the fuck they've been doing with their classified information before now, but this is all jacked up. And I'm not going to go into any further than that, other than the fact to say that it was all fucked up. It was bad. And it was like, people go to prison for this. Pound me in the ass prison. That is what happens to people who do not keep these things up to date. We had things we weren't supposed to, and something with the bureaucracy, and putting stuff there, and whatever. I straightened as much of it out as I could. And it just got to the point where I was sitting on watch, and we were about to deploy. I was about to deploy with another man whom I knew was predatory like Tim was. And I knew that everyone else was sticking up for him despite the fact that he had done bad things and was getting away with it. And I couldn't handle it. Like, that thought in my head, like, I'm going to deploy again, and this person is going to eventually hurt me. even though I wasn't his intended target. It was watching her have that happen to her, and it just got weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder, and it just... I was sitting and I was looking at the radar screen, just doing my regular job, and I was just staring at it, and I thought, you know, I've had a good run. I think it's time for me to go. And I knew how to get to the armory. I knew how to get a weapon. I knew how to do these things. I had enough medicine. I had so many ways to go, and I realized that I was so comfortable with the thought of dying that it would be very easy for me to do it, for me to kill myself again. And I said, something's wrong. I just lost hold of my life. And I had just gotten married to my husband, and marriage was turning out to be not what I thought it would be. And it turns out that he had very different ideas of what marriage was, and he and I are still working out about it to this day. And I let it go for a couple of weeks. I was graying in and out again. Graying out, by the way, means that I'm conscious, I'm aware of things going around me. Like, I can drive, I can do unconscious things, you know, go to the bathroom, eat food, carry on, sweep a thing, but I'm not there. I'm gone. And I started graying out more, and it was getting worse. We were in an exercise where we were controlling hovercraft, LCACs, and we were doing helicopter ops, and we're doing all these things at the same time, and for some reason the stress just built up on me all at once, and I snapped. And I just started screaming and just yelling. And I ended up going down to the medical deck during one of our underway periods. We were around San Diego on the ship, and my brain just snapped, and I'm just crying and screaming, and I can't find any of the medical personnel because it was the middle of the night, and I'm banging on doors, and I couldn't find anybody, and I'm sitting down and standing up, and I'm screaming, and I'm crying, and I'm screaming, and I'm crying, and I'm in pain, but it's not physical pain, and I'm losing my fucking mind, and I couldn't find anybody. And I couldn't find anybody until finally someone finds me and says, why don't you come back in the morning? And I said, I'm not fucking coming back in the morning. You get a doctor right now. You get a doctor right now. And we finally brought down the doctor. And the chaplain came. And I spilled my guts. Everything that happened with Tim. Everything that happened afterward when I tried to get Tim in trouble. And the legal officer said that, well, he's a war hero. There's nothing we can do. And all the people who said that it was my fault that he did those things to me, and all of my own self-hatred and everything, and I told the chaplain everything, and that I wanted to die, and I have wanted to die for many years, and I've tried, and it didn't work. And how much therapy I'd been in, how much medication I was taking, I just said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be alive anymore. And I just need 2 weeks, and I can come back, and I'll be fine. But it was enough, and I was immediately removed from the ship. I was put in a quiet room, and I was immediately removed from the ship. I have it on video, actually, on my phone. Because it was such an odd thing to be doing sea and anchor in reverse. Going back in, but doing it on a rib. And they brought me immediately to the medical center, and I saw my shrink.
Alright, so we're just picking up where you left off. You're being taken off the ship. So if you just want to pick up from that point.
Okay. So I'm being removed from the ship. Meanwhile, it's Comic-Con, so you can see all the Comic-Con stuff happening on the shore. And I was taking video from my phone because it was such an odd thing to be doing scene anchored in reverse and going under the Coronado Bridge without being on a ship. It was just odd. And it was such a liberating experience of, I'm finally getting out of the military. I can leave all this behind. And such shame of having to be removed from a ship again for medical reasons. And I was escorted by my chief, and I was immediately deposited with my shrink, Dr. Peterson. He is awesome. He was a great doctor. He understood why the types of medications I could take with my clearance and the types that I couldn't. And we tried our best to keep me in because I loved my job. And the fight was done. I was done fighting. And to stay in. And I had to accept that. And I saw Dr. Peterson, and Dr. Peterson took a look at me, and he's just like, yep, looks like the jig is up. You know? Like, we did the best that we could. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it. Which, of course, there is. I mean, they tell you that there's no shame in admitting when you're broken. But what you hear from other people is she did it to get out of deployment. I wanted that deployment. Deployment, as hard as it is, it's also a time of, what's the crucible of things, like I said? It's also the crucible of work. Your personal life does not exist anymore, unless bad things are happening to you, then it does exist. But in the good times, when you deploy, you just get to focus on work. You get to focus on your career, your work. You get to live, be, and breathe Navy. You get to focus on your pins. You get to focus on these things. If you want to learn a language, now's the time to do it. Why? Because there's fuck all nothing else to do. You know what I mean? That is your time to do it. You can have candid conversations with people because you're all in the same shitty situation. And it's just this feeling of being separate from the world for a while and being with people who understand you.
Yeah.
The entire time I was in, I spent so much time wishing that I was a man so that I could have friends. Just normal friendships. I would fantasize about just cutting off my breasts and making myself look more masculine, and just, not because I want to be a man, but because I didn't want to be a woman. Because it was hard. Because it was impossible to do anything. It was hard to make rank without somebody saying, oh, that happened because she's a woman and she fucked somebody. And it was hard to do anything physically because the second I was in any sort of PT gear, I'd have to wear heavy sweats because I couldn't let them see my body because I was married. And they would say, oh, look at her, she's trying to get some ass, showing off to the Marines. And it would be constant, all the time, non-stop. Well, why are you talking to him so much? He and I have common interests. We like the same video games. But I couldn't talk to the women because they were more my enemy than the men were. So now my life in the military had become a struggle of being a sexual person without ever admitting that I have sex, without being a prude, without jeopardizing the mission, without being too Jane Navy, without... It was impossible. And it's taken me years after getting out of the military to figure out, or a year later actually, it would be it's coming up on, oh gosh, 4 days ago, it would be a year since I've been out of the military. And anyway, so after that I was sent to TPU again, where I just waited to be kicked out of the military. And it just went on forever. I sent the kids to Michigan, to be with my mother-in-law for 3 months. My husband and I packed up all of our shit and we moved into a motel room together in San Diego. And I would just show up and muster and go to my therapy and the rest of it. And I'd find reasons not to go to muster because I wouldn't want to face people and tell them I was getting out. And I kept telling the chief, look, I have severe depression. This is what it means. It's hard for me to do normal things. It's hard for me to check the mail. It's hard for me to bathe because it takes too much effort. Driving hurts. The sun hurts. people hurt, I randomly start crying in public. All I think about is ways to make it all stop. I'm still stuck in that rut today, where that's all I think about, is if I just yank the truck hard enough, I can make it all stop. If I just take all the pills, I can make it stop. If I can find out how to pick that fucking lock on the shotgun, I can make this all stop. But my children need me, and I can't go anywhere. And I might as well keep going as if I have some sort of future. Keep going to school, keep showing up. I'm not doing well. I'll probably never do well. Anyway, I'm at TPU. I keep missing musters because I just don't care anymore. I can't get up and go anywhere anymore. My kids are gone, and I'm worthless. And the last words I heard before I got out was from another female chief whom I had looked up to. And I said, well, today's the last day of me being in the Navy. And she said, good, get the fuck out of my Navy. I ended up being checked in at the hospital during this time period. My husband thought that I was taking all of my sleeping pills. I'd only take one extra one because I was trying to go to sleep earlier than usual. And then I had drank a beer on top of it while I was sitting in a hot tub. This is December in San Diego, by the way, where you can walk around in a bathing suit during. Yeah. And it made the medicine work a bit faster, the heat plus the alcohol. And he thought I was taking all my medicine. And he took me in to Balboa, which is the name for the hospital there. And he ended up saying, when I got to the hospital, he told them that I had taken all of my medicine. And I felt like my own husband was betraying me. I wasn't trying to kill myself. If I would, I'm usually a little bit more efficient about trying. I know that from experience. You know, you don't take 3 sleeping pills to get, you know, you take them all. Anyway, so that happened, and next thing I know, the nurse is quizzing, saying, have you ever wanted to kill yourself just to show everybody that you could? And I said, yes, of course, duh. So I'm answering philosophical questions about life and death while I'm high on my sleeping pills and being asked questions and crying with the nurse, and I wake up the next day in the mental ward. And the first thing you notice when you wake up in the mental ward is that your bra is missing. And there was a man screaming outside the glass. He was screaming, I'm gonna fucking kill you, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And he was just screaming and pounding on the glass. And I'm laying there, and I look over at him, and there's a man screaming and yelling at me. At this point, I've gained a general distrust of men and women alike. And it was awful. I ended up convincing the people to let me out of the mental ward. And my husband picked me up that day, a couple days later, and he asked me how it was. And I said, you know, eventually we're going to get to the point where we're going to look back on this and laugh. Today is not that day. Finally, I'm out of the military. We decided to move to Michigan. I don't want to be here. But we need his family to watch the kids while I go to school and while he goes to school, because we're going to be very busy and we want to make sure we have family with the children. And my mom eventually ends up having bad things happen to her in Houston, Texas. She lives in a very bad neighborhood. She's very poor and she can't get a job and she's drowning in debt. So I get her out of debt. I drive down there. I pick her up and I take her with me to Michigan. We move to Michigan. We buy a trailer. We immediately enroll at GVSU. And now that's where I am now. I failed my first 2 classes. I failed chemistry and biology. Sometimes I get so depressed that I can't get out of bed. When you mention that you're depressed to people, they don't understand necessarily what that means. They don't understand. They just think that you're sad. And it's not just sadness. It is physical, emotional pain all the time that you can never escape from, ever, no matter what you do. when you're crying because you're so frustrated that you can't figure out where your other sock is, and that is the beginning to every single day, is trying to figure out how to put clothes on, that's depression. When it hurts to be around your children and you're supposed to be the loving matriarch of your household, that's more shame on top of it. I walk around trying to convince myself that I'm not the most awful mother on the planet, that I'm not the most despicable wife on the planet, that I'm not a whore, that I'm not useless, that I'm not stupid, that I wasted my military career, that I should have done more while I was in. That's how I spend most of my time now, is going to therapy. They decided that I was 80% disabled. I don't know what that means. I'm physically fine. But you can't walk around a campus and explain to people who have no idea what depression is. They don't know that your husband has been to war. They don't know what it was like to have the enemy that you thought that you were going to be fighting. And this sounds melodramatic, and I know that, but it's true. When you join the military, you expect that your brothers and sisters in arms are going to look out for you, and you're going to look out for them. What they don't tell you is that if you fuck up once as a female in the military, it will follow you for the rest of your career, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. You can fight the system, you can work your ass off, you can get commendations, and you can fight and fight and fight, and it's still going to follow you. The fact that you are an 18-year-old woman that's warm-blooded and actually just wants to get laid every once in a while and is figuring herself out is a bad thing. And you try to grab, especially as you gain rank, I tried to grab as many young women as I could and say, you know what? This is what's going to happen. It's not your fault. And it would happen to them. I started therapy when I was at TPU, and I was surrounded. I saw Dr. Guide, and she did the CPT class. I had to do it twice. And it's kind of uplifting to know that sometimes your doctors are even surprised you're alive, because that means that you were strong enough to keep going. And it's hard to explain to men who are used to combat-related stress that you're ashamed that your PTSD is due to military sexual trauma than it is from combat. That you're broken in a way that is not the same as everybody else's, but was done internally. You don't get the war hero feeling. You don't get that. They don't make movies after you, and if they do, the woman is still scarred to death at the end of it on the inside. And while I was the doctor guy doing the CPT, there were 20 other women around me who were all raped in random different ways. Mine was a little different because mine was not a once-off. I was raped repeatedly over a year. Over and over. And over and over. And there was not a goddamn thing I could do about it. If I went to the police, I would lose my job. Period. That would be the end of my career. And once I got back, if I decided to seek justice, he was going to attack me and my children. And I wasn't strong enough to fight him off anymore. So I'd let him keep my stuff, if that's what he wanted. I chose my children over justice. And that's the way that I have to frame it in my brain in order to deal with what I've done. Right now, he is out and about, and he's probably hurting somebody else right now. I don't know. But if I see him again, I will kill him. I will go to prison. I will stay in prison. You're not going to hear a peep out of me. While I was there in CPT, Dr. Guide's class wasn't the only one. There was 30 women in one class, 20 in another, and there were cycles and cycles and cycles and cycles and cycles of women in similar situations as me. There are so many of us. There are so fucking many of us. And most of us love our jobs more than we love justice. And all we want to do is serve our fucking country. I just wanted to show up and be able to operate my equipment the best that I possibly could. I wanted to be the war hero. I wanted to be the person that did her job so well that my name was synonymous with excellence. And I was building to that point. And had these things not happened, I would eventually have grown up. I'm not fully grown up, alright? I'm a 25-year-old punk-ass kid. I don't have things figured out yet, okay? I'm not the most excellent of parents, I've made my mistakes, but at least I could prevent other younger people from making my mistakes, you know? I would have gotten better at my job. I would have been a damn fine air traffic controller. I would have gone on to do great things, and I think that I would have been able to help other young women grow up, you know? Like that, what you're supposed to do when you're enlisted in the military.
Yeah, of course.
You start out as a piece of shit and you work your way up, alright?
Yeah, and then you serve as an example to the
Yeah,
US,
yeah, and I would have been able to do that. But I'm not that person anymore. I won't be able to do those things. And now I have some sort of goal that I just made up on the spot of being a virologist when really I don't want to do anything at all. I just want to go. When you meet lots of people in the military, you make lots of friends. Rocky, he was the most romantic person I ever knew. He was a good man. He loved me very, very much. And we ended up breaking up out of circumstance, and I made a mistake, and he made a mistake, and it was young love and whatever. But I thought about him often, and I keep his letters. And I knew that as long as there was at least my husband and him as a good example of good men who were my age, who were out there doing good things and being good, decent human beings to people, that the world was going to be okay. I found out a couple months ago that he committed suicide. I didn't know where he was. I had no idea that he had died, but I found out a couple months ago that a couple years prior, shortly after the last time I spoke to him, I looked at the date and it was within a couple of hours. He had driven to the park in his truck and he had taken a gun and he had blown his brains out in a public park. And I can't find his grave. And it's not really right for me to go there because I'm married. But he's not the only one. My boss committed suicide while I was at FACSFAC. He was one of the first classes. He wasn't directly in charge of things. He ended up getting into an altercation with his wife. He ended up dragging her out, shot her and then himself, while their child was inside. And it keeps happening. Friends of friends are dying, and they just keep killing themselves. And every time it happens, I'm one step closer to going myself, because I want to go too. I can't handle being a civilian very well. I don't know what it's like. I don't know how to make friends like normal people. Usually if you just smoke outside and you find another smoker, you've got one thing in common and you try. But I'm so afraid of men and women in general that I just put a brave face on it and I try to be friendly to everybody. I try to explain to my teachers that it's hard for me to show up to class every day, that I can't, and I just can't stay awake. Thank you. That it's hard for me to focus. I spend about 15 hours a day asleep. But if I don't get this money from the GI Bill for going to class, that we have no money coming in on my behalf. And the amount of effort it takes for me to go to Social Security and explain to them I was raped to the point of my brain being broken over and over and over again and have to retell my story over and over to people who don't give a damn. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of telling people why I'm broken. And I'm tired of trying to explain to people why I'm not a horrible mom, why I'm not a horrible wife, why I get angry because the people around me are happy and normal. I want to go hang out with the other veterans, but I can't stand their looks of pity. And I can't stand the looks of pity in normal civilian people's eyes. And I can't handle it. But I am determined to not kill myself because I can't do that to my husband or my children. It's not polite. It's not fair. And just because my life ended up getting fucked up does not mean that theirs should be too. And I'm trying to be as honest as humanly possible with as many people as humanly possible and giving the whole story from beginning to end so that maybe if they meet someone else who's like me, they won't hurt them and they won't say things like, well, just get up and go to school. We'll just get over it.
I mean, in the wake of all this, I mean, and being in the system, have you noticed any kind of, even just an attempt on the end of the government and the military to make amends, or has it just been non-existent?
Well, they send me money. They have maintained that I am 80% disabled. The people that I do interact that are on the lower echelon of the bureaucracy have understood that I am that my level of depression is much more severe. And I have received help for it, but I didn't show up to one of my appointments, and they were about to drop me of all my disability payment. And that would devastate my family. We would be very, 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 very poor for that. And we're not disgustingly poor now, but I can't work the way that I am right now. I'm not healed yet, and it takes time. There's just no place for me to do it. I can't.
I mean, it sounds like in your case, I mean, they try now with the whole with combat veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, where they have this whole like month or so, or even a couple of weeks of transitioning back into civilian life. But
oh yeah, they call it TAPS. I had to attend that. It was a week of me going to classes about how to get a job, but pretty much I was immediately checking into college. What they can't do is fully immerse you in civilian life.
No.
And for those of us who have never been civilians ever in the first place, we don't really know what to do once we're outside of that.
Right.
When your sole identity is the military and you are effectively removed from it and you're not part of that anymore, I don't have rank anymore. There's nothing special about me anymore. I'm just another punk-ass kid at college. I'm older and I have children, so I can't go out and hang out and have fun. I don't like to get drunk. I don't like to party. I read books and I stay home and I try my damnedest to make sure that I have a smile plastered on my face whenever I show up to school or whenever I see my children. And I try to be a good wife for my husband, and I try to be a good support for my mother. And I try my best in school, and there's just, I don't know. I just feel like that anything that I knew how to succeed at, I don't have any of those skills now. Where I can't even maintain a job. And
that kind of seems to be a recurring theme, where you have a lot of, just that exactly, where you have a lot of people coming back. More common in the infantry, but still just it seems like in every facet of the military, you have men and women coming back and saying, I don't know how to, my skill set is not to do civilian work. It's just not there.
yeah, and you also don't have the same rank thing too. Like right now, I don't even know how to view my professors, because essentially I'm paying them to teach me something, and yet they come up with arbitrary rules, but they're not above me in rank, but they're still my professor. I still think in terms of rank, in all things rank. Officer enlisted.
Right.
Who's in charge of what? And it's your job is to teach me these things, so that at the same time, if I can't show up to class for something, I understand that that's a hindrance on them, that they have 20 other students, hundreds of other students that they need to work with, and I get that. But I understand the information. I just cannot show up all the time. Sometimes I am at home and I am floating on what I call the island of Tempur-Pedic, where I sit and I cry all day long. And that is all I'm capable of doing. I've achieved consciousness. And sometimes that's my biggest achievement. And I will do the homework, and I will turn it in before the end of the semester, and I will take all your tests, and I will show you that I know this stuff, and I will study just as hard as anybody else, but I can't do it on your time. I wish that I could, but I can't. I can't do online classes because I need to see a physical person. If I stay in online classes, yeah, I'll get the work done, but I need to see people. That's part of my therapy. I mean, I'm here with you in an apartment, relatively by myself with a male that I don't know, that's not part of my family. This is a step in the right direction. I am terrified of you. I'm terrified of you, and I'm terrified of your girlfriend, and I'm terrified of people on campus. This is hard for me. I hide it well. I hide it with humor. I hide it with fake gestures of comfort. I have to remind myself not to sit in a ball. I have to remind myself that you're not going to hurt me, that the door is right behind me, and that I'm safe. I have to remind myself that at any point I probably will be able to defend myself. I remind myself that you seem like a decent human being. But this is every day for me. When I'm walking around on campus and more than one man turns and looks at me as I'm walking by, I realize that I'm not wearing enough clothes to make myself look fat enough that no one's paying attention to me. I feel naked all the time. And that's my reality now. And part of that's from the military, part of that's from Tim, and part of that is just from my brain not working correctly. and trying to explain that to people, especially since I'm so good at hiding the symptoms. I've spent so many years hiding my symptoms to keep my clearance that I'm an expert at it now, that now I can't even show how broken I am. Even to my husband. That there's no amount of explaining to share what it's like unless they go through it themselves. And even other people who have milder forms of depression, when you try to explain to them what it's like to have the severe variety of it, they don't understand. They're like, well, it clears up eventually. My depressions can last over a year. The fact that I put food in my face is an accomplishment. And that's hard. I'm currently connected with the SVA on campus. It's the Student Veterans Association of America. I just got tapped to be president once the current president steps down. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do it, if I'm going to be able to stay in school at all after failing at trigonometry and failing at my chemistry classes and failing at things, but I'm going to find a way to do it. And my husband, he is also working for the PAVE program. He was recently interviewed for that. He's very active within the veteran community on campus as well. He and I both try very hard to make sure that we stay connected to a campus and to each other. And it's nice to stay connected with people who understand my sense of humor and my mentality and my fatalism, because we do have a fatalistic sense of humor. But it's also hard because my experience is different from theirs as men, that I can't even talk about it, really.
I mean, that's just kind of it has kind of become the new nature, unfortunately, of where you have these two different spheres. Of you have this one group that they're suffering from PTSD from combat-related events that happen, but then you have also these people that they've also done their own kind of sacrifice in a way, that they've also suffered a lot for this cause they believed in. And what's horrifying about that is that happened within our own ranks.
Where I never fought the enemy that much, where I knew that I was throwing bombs at him from our ships, that we were sending men in to go, and that some of them would not be coming back. And you prepare yourself for those things. But what I didn't realize was how much I'd be spending so much time trying not to be assaulted on a regular basis. And by that, I mean, just, Tim was the worst, but he wasn't the only one. The worst ones as well was the constant sniping of the small attacks, you're wearing that uniform too tight, you're showing off your body too much. I would have to wear enough makeup to where I was looking like I was put together enough to be a professional. But if I even went a bit too much, I was being a whore. If I didn't wear any makeup at all, I was not being professional enough. If my hair was too stylish, I was too much of a pretty girl. And if my hair was not done up at all, then I was a shitbag. And I'd have to walk that fine line. Even to this day, I still focus very much on how much my breasts show through my clothing, how much my hips show through my clothing. The fact of the matter is I have a figure, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I wear bulky clothes. I wear pants that stay straight, that hide as much as I can. I wear things that can button up all the way to the top if I need to. Like if I was going to go to school today, I would button all the way as much as I could, just so nobody would be able to say that I wasn't being modest. My position as a wife and a mother is also under suspect on a regular basis. The fact that I have a military mentality about things, about life and death in general, means that I'm going to take different risks than other people. I am not afraid of people kidnapping my children off the street, because I know that, statistically speaking, it's not really going to happen. And if it does happen, there's nothing I could have done about it. So it's a different feeling. And it's also a different feeling about war in general, where my biggest battle was with regular men and women. I didn't get to fight the enemy. I didn't have an enemy. I mean, I did, but my sense of patriotism has been clouded by that. My sense of what the war was about. I don't want to go into too much of what I understood from an intelligence perspective. But what I saw a lot of was us doing regular strikes on places that didn't seem to matter. and men that I was very close to coming back from wars, broken, for something that doesn't even really make sense. For a war that doesn't make sense. And it's tiring. Especially when you grew up the way that I did, believing that your place was in the military, was in government service, and then not fitting into that. And trying to forge a new identity for yourself. I'm a scientist. I'm something. I'm a wife, I'm a mother. And then not fitting those either. It's horrifyingly sad to not have an identity. And I'm still trying to find mine now. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what a person sees from the outside looking in. I want to know. I want to stop random people on the street and be like, what do you see? What is showing up here? What do you see when I walk around this campus? Just so I can have some sort of guide of where I'm supposed to be right now. There's a feeling when you're in the military where you get the sinking suspicion that you're not in the right place at the right time in the right uniform, which is pretty much what they tell you all you have to do to succeed in the military, and show up at the right place at the right time in the right uniform and you'll be okay. That sinking suspicion of Chief is looking for me and I don't know where I'm supposed to be right now. It's a horrifyingly, if you give a shit, it's a horribly anxiety-inducing feeling. But now I feel it all the time. I'm not where I'm supposed to be right now. I don't know where I'm supposed to be right now. My other friends have found a way of leaving by committing suicide. They literally bite the bullet and call it quits. They're just like, I'm done trying to figure out how I fit into this society. I don't know what the fuck the rules are. I don't know who's in charge. I just want to follow orders and get the shit done. None of this makes sense. This isn't my reality anymore. I don't have that closeness anymore, that immediate closeness that you have with people that you sit on watch with for 8 hours a day. When you look at the same ass every day for 8 hours, for 24/7 for a good couple of months, you get close. And you will never experience that closeness again of shared suckage. You get some camaraderie, I guess, in college if you're going through the same program with someone, but it's not the same. It's very different. No. And I wanted more of that. But I didn't get that, and that makes me angry. And now I spend most of my time going to therapy. I take different medications for the morning than I do at night. My main goal is to stay awake long enough to be a present parent, to show up to my classes, to show up to where I need to be. But it's fighting all the time. And I think I'm repeating myself.
Oh, no, it's alright. I mean, I think that, in a way, that kind of encapsulates what most veterans are feeling. At least from these two past wars where you had a lot of men and women coming back, and it's that idea that the war doesn't really end when you come home. It doesn't end when the service is done.
A part of me wants to go back. That was such a huge part of my identity, like I said, that I see different ships that are going overseas, and I want to go too. Like, I'm good at that. I'm good at deploying, honestly. Like, if the other people who were out to get me for some random reason were gone, and if I didn't have kids or a spouse, and, if we had a different culture within the military where I was just treated as a sailor as opposed to as a woman, where that was a detrimental thing.
Right.
And if I was allowed to be a human being, a sexual human being, like the men were allowed to be. But if I were allowed to have those things, I think I would have eventually grown into something great. And I'm not saying, it's a far cry from saying, because there's that wish that you could just blame the military for all things. I know I fucked up quite a bit, and I know that with time I would have been able to improve. Like, I'm not saying that, it's all the military's fault that I fucked up. No, I genuinely fucked up due to hormones, bad decisions, being young, being stupid. I did stupid shit. I learned from them, and I think that I'm a good and moral person, and that, given time, I would have been able to achieve something great. And yet, I will never be able to join the service again. I will never be able to hold a clearance again. I will never be able to have the trust of my government again. I contemplated being a cop just to have that sense of purpose again. But right now I'm still too broken. And I don't know how to get that back. I don't know how to I don't know how to start over and reboot. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to have a normal family. I don't know how. I see what I could be. I just don't know how to get from point A to point B. I see it. You could stick me in a lab and work me to death. Seriously. You could work me to death. If I was back to my normal mental place. I love to work. If you give me the orders, I will sit down and I will poke that virus over and over and over and over and over again until it rolls over. And I'll keep going if you want me to. But there's something in the way, and I don't know what it is or what to do about it or how to unblock it or how to remove whatever that barrier is. Depression, sadness, loss of identity. You can put names to it, but whatever the fuck it is. It's a see-through gelatinous surface that I'm constantly clawing against and trying to explain to people that it's there, but they can't see it. It's an invisible monster that I keep poking at and trying to get through to the other side, but nobody else can see it. All they see is me moving sluggishly and looking lazy and saying, well, why can't you just do this? And I can't. And I can't explain it, and I can't.
But you have done I think, at least in my opinion, you have done at least somewhat justice in explaining it. And I mean, that's part of it too, is just being able to have people share their stories, and this so happens to be your story, and that it's archived, and it will be archived, and that it will be preserved in some way so you're not just, it's not just one that other people may just be able to look at and say, this matches up pretty well with what I experienced as well.
I just, after losing so much privacy, and after being, I guess you want to say subjected to, but after all of this, I want my story to at least be helpful to somebody. Some researcher who's looking into how to make the military better. Some person who is just interested in hearing the different stories. Or aliens from outer space who dig this video up 2,000 years from now and wonder what the hell happened during 2015. Or why are they different between the men and the women and what happened. Or even just somebody out there at least just nodding along somewhere during my story, and that gives me comfort. And I don't know. At least, if shit's gonna suck for me, hopefully it's useful to somebody else. I mean, I can handle a shitstorm, but as long as it's being used by something, as long as it's useful for somebody, then it's not all for nothing. And although I never achieved military greatness, I was never the soldier that my father was. I was never the soldier that my husband was, for that matter. He was a fantastic sergeant. He is a fantastic sergeant. So even though I'll never achieve those things, I don't know. I just have to find something else to focus on now.
Well, thank you. I think that actually kind of wraps it up really well for us, though. I mean, it kind of covered the last question I was going to ask, and that's usually just what are your reflections on your service. And I think it was very thoughtful, in the sense of being thought out, I guess.
Oh, I spend nothing but laying in bed all day and thinking about it. So when you have that much time, I'm glad that I'm at least somewhat coherent. Thank you.
Thank you.